Hi, Wild Things. Welcome back for the third installment in my Errors of Us story of exactly how the Errors of Us promo and rollout went, how I responded to the song, how Carrie responded to my responding, and how we eventually resolved the conflict that was created in the way that that song was dropped and when it was dropped and like how it was dropped and, you know, all the marketing that surrounded that particular choice and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's what we're here for, obviously. And if you haven't watched part 2, I would strongly recommend going back and watching that for vital context of, you know, exactly what was going on around the time that Carrie was promoting the song, what all of the song promo was like referencing, you know, how I was responding to the song, particularly given that Carrie and I could not communicate at the time, and therefore a lot of things were very open to interpretation, and therefore I was inserting a lot of meaning into everything that was going on. Like, all my stuff like came up, and because of the ambiguity of the situation, I was definitely inserting a lot of that stuff into the situation, and things were extremely dark and difficult for me. Let me just say that. So again, if you haven't watched the previous part, I would strongly recommend going back for all that context, because that will make the rest of the story just a lot more, like rich. Like, I think you need to know the backstory. I think you need to know the context. But yeah, essentially we're going to start this video where we left off on the last video, which was essentially that, you know, I'd obviously created the first video in this 3-part series talking about, you know, how I felt and how I responded to the situation and like what I was thinking, given that I had absolutely no context. And yeah, like I was just kind of having to deduce as much stuff as possible, while also having a lot of my own stuff come up, having a lot of my own fears and anxieties come up, and, you know, like essentially having no answers. So that's kind of where we are in the story. So essentially, to recap everything that had happened up until I dropped the How I'm Doing video, the first part of this 3-part series, essentially the recap is that obviously I was aware of the original marketing strategy and the original timeline of things, and leading up to Errors of Us, I obviously knew that the marketing strategy would have changed, and, you know, based on some of the clues that Carrie was leaving, I was assuming that she was going to be able to tell more of the truth at this time around. It wasn't going to be based on, you know, a fabricated situation the way the first marketing strategy was. But I had no idea that the timeline had changed. Like, I was fully under the impression that the timeline had not changed. There was nothing, you know, kind of going on that raised any red flags that the timeline had changed. Then when Carrie was promoting Errors of Us, again, there was no red flags that the timeline had changed, or that Errors of Us wasn't about me, given that every piece of promo that she dropped, apart from one thing, was just so relevant to our connection that I just could not fathom that she would have put those things in a song not about me. And then, you know, Errors of Us obviously dropped. And, you know, originally all I had to go off was the lyrics, which, you know, the story, the plot seemed a lot more about Shannon than what I was expecting it to be. But then the music video dropped and there was lots of Easter eggs about me in it, and that obviously created a very confusing situation, especially given that this all happened on my birthday with no heads up. Like, I was completely blindsided, and yeah, I had absolutely no idea that the plan had changed or why she was doing what she was doing. And so yeah, like, I just ended up so hurt and confused by that, and just like so panicked about what it all meant, and, you know, potentially, you know, being concerned that I'd misread the situation completely, especially given that, you know, I was kind of like reading the situation based on vibes, and I had very little physical evidence to back me up, particularly given that we could not speak at the time. Like, you know, I think it was kind of fair of me to have freaked out that I'd misread everything, given, you know, how little concrete things I had to hold on to. Like, literally, I was holding on to smoke, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was holding on to it like whispers. And so, yeah, like, obviously that was going to fuck with my head in terms of like, and particularly as well because I'd had so many people like constantly like bombarding me with negative energy and trying to deny my reality that, you know, that energy does affect you. Like, of course I was going to be sitting there in that moment and kind of like, you know, feeling like my whole reality had collapsed. You know what I'm saying? Like, that led to a very painful moment where, like I was obviously struggling with, not feeling cared for, feeling blindsided, feeling like hurt that I'd been allowed to walk into that situation and, get so hurt and have, like be so vulnerable in terms of like my own mental and emotional well-being, like that, she'd created a situation for me to walk into that, was super painful and was super just like a lot in terms of like what I was thinking and what I was feeling. And yeah, like I was questioning if it was all a lie. Like I was definitely not in a good place. And, based on, the situation also being super ambiguous, having no context, like it just created this like perfect storm of like me then starting to project all my shit into the situation and just making it 10 times more painful than it needed to be. Because like the situation was so ambiguous, but yet also just like reflected so much of, shit from my past that, it was hard for me not to bring up all my own shit and like make the situation 10 times worse for myself and make it 10 times more painful based on, all the stuff within me that it was triggering. And to make matters worse, the stories that I was in at the time seemed very similar to the stories that her ex was in when her ex was in a similar situation with Carrie. And so, that was definitely burying me deeper into my own narratives for a moment because, there was obviously some questioning of like, was Carrie's ex right the whole time? And this is actually the situation. Fortunately, I didn't stay there very long because, fortunately, I have done enough work to understand the difference between, being in narrative and being in fears and anxieties and genuine gut intuitions that, I'd felt prior to the whole Errors of Us situation that, still felt real and true while, everything that I was in at the time felt like a lot of triggered energy. At the same time, like, even though like I was starting to pull myself out of it, in terms of starting to pull myself out of narrative, starting to pull myself out of triggered energy, like even when I was trying to get a lid on like my own stuff that I was inserting into the situation, like I was still like deeply, deeply, deeply hurt by the situation just being what it was in terms of being blindsided, and like being put in a position to be vulnerable to, the choices that she was making. Like I still had a lot of unanswered questions. And, like even though I was trying to get myself out of that kind of triggered energy, like there was still so much ambiguity that, like it was hard to, like find what the truth was, amidst kind of like all my shit coming up, and amidst like, just such lack of context. Like it was so hard to like navigate what the truth of the situation was, which obviously led to me starting to decipher like what were the big kind of like sticky points that I was like dealing with at the time, to try and put them into a video, try and put them into some sort of communication so that I could bring them to Carrie and hopefully find some relief in my situation and move closer to whatever the truth was, which at the time, like I didn't really have a good compass for. Meanwhile, while I'm, trying to deal with all my stuff coming up and trying to deal with, the situation, how to respond to it and how to, respond to it in a way that's hopefully going to help me find some relief from my suffering. Carrie's obviously heard that I've hurt her. I've sent her one message to let her know that she hurt me, and then she's watched me go ghost. And so obviously she's on TikTok, posting TikToks, trying to soothe me, trying to comfort me, trying to, help me in that pain. She had posted a TikTok letting me know that she was still fully intending to make me her girl. She posted a TikTok letting me know that this song is supposed to be a clean song about Shannon. She posted a TikTok letting me know that, she's waiting for the right time, that it wasn't the right time to, let the finding rewilding cat out of the bag. She posted a TikTok with some of the Easter eggs that are in the Errors of Us music video that have to do with me, particularly the train and the espresso martini. And then she'd also posted this last TikTok before I posted my How I'm Doing video. And this is where she calls herself an adrenaline slut. And, to this day, I'm not 100% sure what her intention was with that, whether it was just calling out the lyric for the sake of promo, or if it was, potentially as a result of like maybe realizing that she should have realized that, what she was doing might have hurt me, which, with 2020 hindsight, I look back and realize how, why she, didn't necessarily preempt that the errors of our situation would hurt me. I can see how from where she's standing and from, the kind of strengths and weaknesses in terms of, where she's good at empathizing and where, some things are maybe a little bit harder for her. She could have totally walked into that situation having no idea that it was going to hurt me, genuinely. But I think, potentially this TikTok might have been calling herself an adrenaline slut for letting me walk into that situation. I think, potentially that could have been her intention, is to let me know that, she was definitely playing with fire with that. And with 2020 hindsight, maybe shouldn't have let me walk into that situation. And that was her, kind of playing with fire. But, I'm not 100% certain on that interpretation. But yeah, I can definitely see that might have been what she was trying to say with that. And then after all that, I dropped the how I'm doing video. And the main kind of fears and anxieties that, I centered most of that video around, of mine that were, causing me the most trouble at the time, that I was looking for relief from, were first of all, whether or not I was being used as a Trojan horse muse and what that would mean for, the future of mine and Carrie's love story, whether that was the end of it or not. The second point was, at the time, I was very much not feeling cared for, which, 2020 hindsight, I understand why that was the feeling that I was in, and how I was contributing to that by kind of projecting things onto Carrie, and how, she was contributing that by projecting things back onto me. And then the third thing was being concerned that we were being kept apart by choice, not by force anymore. That was a particular big anxiety that I was in at the time. And then the fourth sticky point that I brought up in that video was being concerned that Carrie was, potentially in a bit of her bad guy complex kind of patterning to do with the situation. And that was potentially why we were where we were at. And obviously that was another thing that kind of resolved on its own, particularly given that I was, realizing where that was maybe more of a me problem and me projecting into the situation that she was less healed and evolved than what she actually was. And kind of infantilizing her. That was definitely a me thing. So kind of those were the 4 points at the time that felt really sticky and felt really heavy and were weighing on me a lot. And even though, the second point was a bit of a both of us not seeing eye to eye and not understanding each other issue. And the fourth point was definitely a me thing. At the time, I was definitely super hurt by all these things. And, these were all the things that I was looking for relief from. So I post the how I'm doing video, which is essentially just a compilation of all my fears, my anxieties, all the sticky points that I'm having a really hard time grappling with, all the things that I'm not understanding about the situation, and all the ways that I'm feeling super vulnerable in the situation, also not feeling super safe, seen and heard. And then I wait. While I was waiting, I had been starting to process some of my feelings by, writing, basically since my birthday. I think the day after my birthday, I started, just basically getting it all out, creating characters. And, by the time I made the how I'm doing video, I'd written, a quarter of a book. So I was waiting, but also kind of, processing my feelings in the best way that I could based on the tools available to me. I was definitely doing things in the background. I was really prioritizing, regulating my nervous system, doing those 2-hour walks every day to make sure that, my flight response wasn't, wanting to yeet me out of the situation. Really focus on feeding myself, taking care of myself, writing, finding that catharsis within myself. And particularly I was focusing on all the stuff that I knew that I was bringing into the situation. That was the thing that I felt was really my responsibility to work through, all the kind of narrative and stories and things, the way that I was making things mean things based on my past experience. That was mostly what I was getting from writing, in particular. And that honestly was a huge relief. And it did take a while to kind of like fully like work. Like, it wasn't until, I'd written, say 90% of the book by mid-January that I was kind of like starting to get it together in terms of like feeling like, I'd processed particularly my side of the situation, and all the things that I was bringing to the situation. So like, I was like definitely waiting for a response, but also like not waiting for a response. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like open to seeing how she would respond, but also like I was definitely prioritizing the things that I needed to do for me at the time. It took Carrie 2 days after I posted it and obviously DM'd her the link to respond. And the way that she responded was by posting this TikTok, obviously 2 days after the fact. And the sound that she'd used was a scissor sound, I think. And it said something like, "I'm playing the victim, you're playing the pick-me. That's embarrassing." And that obviously hurt my feelings, even though I was kind of expecting that kind of response from her, particularly just based on the fact that I knew that I was bringing up really sensitive points to her and some things that were going to be really hard for her to receive, some things that were going to feel really emotionally high stakes. And even though in the context of our connection, she'd come leaps and bounds, like she'd evolved so much in her ability to receive things. Like, I remember way at the start, like I'd bring stuff up like kind of casually at the start in regards to how I'd feel about things. Like sometimes I'd bring up, feeling jealous or whatever, and I'd get a very defensive and reactive kind of response. But, as soon as she started reacting and defending herself, when I would bring stuff up kind of not super, just bring stuff up, I would say a little bit casually at the start, it was what I was doing. I obviously realized that people aren't defensive and reactive for no reason. Usually people are defensive because they've had to defend themselves against personal attacks, and usually people are reactive when they've experienced a lot of aggressive action. So yeah, like obviously that changed the way that I was bringing stuff up to her, and I was also like bringing up like how much I was trying to, be really mindful about the way that I was bringing stuff up to her. And I understood, where those kind of reactions came from, and that it was not okay, but like I got it. And yeah, I was basically like, I'm making an effort. Like, I need you to do the same. So yeah, like she had come like super, super, super far in terms of like being way less defensive, way less like reactive with me. However, I just knew that this situation was going to be one of those moments that would have been like too hard for her to not go into that kind of like pattern of hers, just given how emotionally high stakes it was and how like sticky some of the stuff that I was bringing up was going to be for her to receive. And even though I understood and I was kind of expecting it, that reaction obviously hurt my feelings at the time. And I think, the way that she responded to me in that moment where, I was in a really, dark and vulnerable place, like I think that particular reaction did extend the time that it took me to move past, all the hurt that I was feeling with Errors of Us. Even though like she did do a 180 and eventually started responding to me the way that I needed to respond to her, I think, I probably would have, moved past the hurt that I was in a lot quicker had I been, responded to a little bit better initially. However, like I do want to say some things in her defense in terms of, the reaction that she had. Firstly, like, while I absolutely feel like I needed to bring up the, like, not feeling cared for thing, because that was just, like, my very real lived experience, and that's how she was coming across to me, at the same time, like, I do understand her having the reaction she had, given, how much of a big trigger point this is. And, with 2020 hindsight, I understand why it's such a big trigger point now, or at least the majority of why. Like, I'm sure there's more context and nuance that I do not, still to this day, do not know about that situation. But yeah, like I do understand her not reacting super well, just given, how much of a button this is. Like, that would have been so hard to receive. And I think just the same way that Errors of Us was creating this kind of perfect storm for me to bring up all my, kind of relational trauma and, insert it into the situation, I think me like simply bringing up that I didn't feel cared for would have been doing the exact same thing to her. Like, I think that potentially would have opened like a floodgate in terms of like her inserting like a whole heap of her relational trauma like into the situation, given that, you know, from what I've gathered, like, you know, that's come up before. Like, I've seen people from her past imply in a pretty, you know, unhealthy and unproductive way that she doesn't care about them. And I've seen people also imply that she's not empathetic in a super toxic way, which, you know, like, I just think like that in particular, like, I can just imagine that she was potentially in the exact same boat as me in terms of something happening with us and it triggering like everything from her past and just making it a little bit hard to, you know, deal with the present situation with me based on, you know, all the stuff that would have been dragged into it, based on, you know, the particular sensitive topic that came up. Like, I get that. And the thing with that as well is that obviously like that particular, you know, point that I brought up, like that was definitely both of us contributing to that. Like, definitely there was some things that, you know, she was not thinking about in terms of, you know, being able to preempt how I might react to the situation, which, you know, like I don't blame her for. I know that's not a strength of hers. But at the same time, like I was definitely projecting some things back to her and just like, you know, assuming that she was going to do certain things for me based on me assuming kind of like that she had a lot more feminine energy than she did. And, you know, I was kind of like putting all these expectations on her based on, you know, my assumption that that's how she would be meeting me with that feminine energy. And that was really not fair of me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had so many expectations and projections back and, you know, was making it mean so much more than what it meant, and was just like actually not seeing her in that moment because, you know, I was so full of my own, you know, projections and expectations. Yeah, I think that particular point was a lot of, you know, both of us not seeing and understanding each other and not really, you know, getting where each other was coming from. And while like my point I think is valid in terms of like I was obviously not feeling super cared for, and, you know, that was, you know, directly tied to some choices that she'd made, and, you know, I think that was valid. Like, I just think, you know, that situation was ended up being so much worse and so much more emotionally high stakes because there was just all this other stuff going on around it that would have made that harder to receive. I think if it had have just been in this moment, I'm not feeling cared for as a direct result of some choices that you've made, if like that was the end of it, like I just don't think that that would have been as much of a trigger point. But like there was a lot going on both sides of that made that, yeah, like just way worse in general. And so like, you know, I understand having a big reaction to that. Another thing I'll say in her defense is that at the time that I had posted the How I'm Doing video, she had made so much of an effort to try and soothe my fears, to comfort me in the capacity that she could, given the restrictions that she was under. Like, she was trying every day to like tell me things, to try and make things better. And, you know, I think something that I've been very guilty of this whole time is that every time my feelings would get hurt, I would do two things that were definitely like not helping the situation. Is that first of all, when she didn't go in to see, hear and validate when I was upset, I'd get twice as upset. Like, I'd get way more upset about her reaction to me being upset than the reason why I was upset in the first place, which is essentially like the crux of the fight getting out of hand in the middle of the year. Like, that was definitely on me a little bit, like getting way more upset at her because of the way she was responding to me. And the fucking ironic thing is that like I'd get way more upset about the way that, you know, she was responding to me. And yet, like, it did not occur to me to try and fix the problem by communicating that to her and being like, oh, this is what I need in this moment. Like, I need to be seen, heard, and validated before you go, like, try and fix the problem for me. Which, you know, like, that apparently is her skill because, like, when I was upset, like, she went straight into like, I'm going to fix it for you. I'm going to tell you all these things about, you know, like why the situation is better than what you think it is, to try and, you know, fix you being upset about the situation. And to be honest, like, I think this did come across to me a little bit like, you know, even though I'm getting it now that she was just trying to fix the problem, like, I think part of the reason why I got way more upset was because I was taking it as like her thinking that my feelings were wrong. Like, it was coming across invalidating even though I don't think that's the situation. I think, when she hears that I'm upset and I have a problem, she just tries to fix it, and tell me all the things of like, how she's going to make it better. But yeah, like I was not receiving it that way. And it's so crazy, like that, like I do think we have a lot to offer each other in terms of like teaching each other things. Like I do definitely see like how I needed to like, when I was getting twice as upset because she wasn't responding to me a certain way, I needed to be fixing that by telling her how to respond to me. Like once I told her to do that, she did it. And now we're like golden, you know what I'm saying? Because she does meet me with see, hear, validate first now. And in the same regard, instead of her jumping into like, I'm going to fix it for you, now she stops and like acknowledges the feeling before dealing with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we've both learned a lot from each other in terms of like just how to grow as individuals and how to like meet another person like exactly where they are and how they are. And yeah, definitely like it's definitely humbling me, you know what I'm saying? Like I've definitely been humbled, and just learned a lot about, how to like really like center, her and like what she actually needs from me. And I'm assuming vice versa. And yeah, just like, yeah, I think I've just grown in my capacity to love for sure. But that brings us to the second thing that I think I've done kind of regularly to make the situation worse when I do get upset. And I think this is coming like more from a bit more of the shadowy feminine, to be honest. And that's that, like obviously like I don't think I necessarily fully chose to be in this situation, but at the same time, like I can hand on my heart definitely admit that I'm also 100% choosing not to remove myself from the situation. That's an active choice that I'm making, is not to remove myself now that I've been dragged into it. Like that choice is available to me and I'm not making it. And even though I try very hard to deal with the hurt that I'm incurring because, not necessarily because I'm choosing to be in this situation, but because I'm not choosing to be in this situation, like I'm dealing with a lot of like hurt and pain, like constantly things are coming up. And I try and deal with that to the best of my ability. But, like there's some resentment still that's building up towards Carrie for this, simple reason that, like the reason why I'm in this situation is more tied to things from her life than it is necessarily tied to things in my life. Like I know that, I was active on social media and that, obviously makes me partly to blame, but at the same time, like, the crux of like why we're in this situation, like from where I'm standing, is a little bit more, at least a little bit coming more from her life than my life. And while there's things that, I think are a little bit beyond her control, at the same time, while I can know that in the smart part of my brain, my lizard part of my brain still associating it with her. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm finding it very hard to detangle her from, me getting hurt in this situation. And therefore, there's definitely some resentment there that I'm trying to work through, but at the same time, hard to work through it when, she's not here with me. And because that's the situation, like on the best day, like I'm trying to remind myself that I'm not choosing this situation. So I need to make every effort to, detangle the resentment that's building up from Carrie and try and work through it. Because that's not fucking fair. Like it's not fucking fair for me to like, hold on to resentment for like against her. Because, I might not have chosen the situation. At the end of the day, I didn't not choose it. Like I had an out and I didn't stay out. You know what I'm saying? So like, I can't like hold on to resentment towards her. Like that's just like not cool, first of all. And second of all, that's bringing a toxicity that I don't want in my own, like little world. And I also don't want in my connection. And I don't want that to be, become a poison in this connection. That's all well and good on a good day. But when I am having a bad day, that is so hard. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm having a bad day and I'm really hurt, I start to get so much more hurt. First of all, because I'm trying to deal with so much resentment that, I'm trying to like work through. And I think, particularly when I'm like very hurt, I think I have a tendency to actively stop like trying to fight that resentment and I just let it be there. And I think, that's definitely one of the ways that I bring toxicity into this situation. Like, like I'm not choosing to be here, you know what I'm saying? Like, and sometimes like when I'm really hurt, I stop doing the thing that I really think like morally I should commit to for the entire time I'm in this situation that I'm, not not choosing to get out of. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think every day that I'm in this, morally, I probably should be committing to like working through any resentment that's building up, because I've not actively chosen it, but not chosen it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think part of the not choosing it, not choosing to leave or whatever, I don't know, the double negatives are confusing me. Because I'm not removing myself from the situation. Like, I think part of the package deal should be that, you know, I deal with the resentment every day. But, you know, when I'm really upset, sometimes I hit pause. And so on the days that I'm just really, really, really hurt, for example, around the Errors of Us time, like, you know, like I just stop actively fighting the resentment. I'm full of resentment. And, you know, then when I, you know, look at her TikTok and she's posting all of these things, like, I'm obviously not going to receive that well. And that's, you know, at least a little bit on me. You know what I'm saying? Like, because, you know, like when I signed up, well, not that I signed up to it, but when I did not, you know, like yeet myself out of the situation, when I didn't say no, like part of the package deal was that if we have to communicate, this is the way she has to communicate. She has to communicate through these, you know, like subtle messages online. Like, that's the deal. I knew that was the deal when I decided not to dip. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the deal that I agreed to. And so, you know, when she's trying to communicate things to me through the medium through which I, you know, agreed to when I didn't remove myself from the situation, like, really, I feel like that's on me to like actually listen to her. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, like when I get really upset and I just let the resentment be there, I don't fucking listen. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just let myself be too hurt and too resentful, and just like, you know, it just like, I let it not land, essentially. Like, I really don't do my part to help it land. You know what I'm saying? Like, I come around, like when I move through, you know, how hurt I am, I do come around and I do eventually like sit down and listen to what she's saying, and I do see it from her side. But yeah, definitely in the moment, a lot of times, like, yeah, it doesn't land with me. I don't take it super well. And yeah, I let that like hurt and resentment become a barrier to us being connected. And yeah, like then, you know, I think it can come across as like her effort to like do things for me that is so sweet. It's so sweet of her to have tried so hard to like make me feel better. Like, yeah, I think it doesn't come across super well. It comes across as, you know, like probably like on her side, she's probably receiving it as like what she's doing isn't good enough. And it is good enough. It's like so good in the context of like the situation and like the restriction she's under, which I obviously knew that was the situation when I didn't remove myself from the situation. Like, she didn't do anything wrong and everything she did was enough. But yeah, like, you know, sometimes I'm the problem in terms of like not receiving things super well. So I also get like her not reacting super well to me in the context of, you know, me obviously having, you know, not let any of her attempts to like soothe things and fix things with me land with me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, you know, putting myself in her shoes, like, I think she was trying so hard, you know, within the restrictions she was under, which, you know, I obviously like agreed to, like when I stayed in the situation, like I knew that was the deal. Yeah, like she really was doing everything she could. And yeah, like I was letting that not be enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course I came around and I was like, you know, seeing it more from her point of view. And like, eventually, like those things did land with me and I did appreciate it. But yeah, it did take me some time. And, you know, like I was the person in my own way with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was the person letting the hurt and resentment get in the way of like me hearing her. And, you know, like not, yeah, like, you know, like, I think I was just too hurt and full of too much resentment to like, you know, like I don't think I'm anywhere near evolved enough as a person to have been able to get past that, to like actually been able to hear her at the time. But, you know, like I'm definitely on that road. Like I definitely feel a lot closer to it now, like that I've been through this experience and had the 2020 hindsight of realized where I get in my own way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think in that moment shit was too hard. But yeah, like I definitely, you know, see how like I was making it a lot harder. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, you know, if I could go back again, like I think I would have tried to like open my heart a little bit more, and, you know, not let the like hurt and resentment be in the driver's seat so much, so that I could actually like have received, what she was trying to do, like at least a little bit better. And like maybe that would have, changed how and what I said in the how I'm doing video. Like I think, I might have been able to say some things without so much, like hurt in like what I was saying. You know what I'm saying? Like if I could have my time again, I would have at least tried a little bit harder to have let what she was doing, like at least soothe me like a little. I do think it was fair that, she was upset that she made all of that effort and it wasn't landing with me. Like, I think that's totally fair to be upset about in that situation and, for her to have the reaction that she had. And the last thing that I can see that I think makes her reaction make sense is that, like obviously what I've already said in terms of the bad guy complex stuff, like I really get that, like that was way more of a me thing than it was a her thing. And I get how it definitely would have come across like super disappointing to hear that, I was kind of like infantilizing her and treating her like a less healed and grown adult than what she actually is. Like that wouldn't have been nice. I can hand on my heart admit that would not have been nice to hear, from someone that you love who, loves you as well. Like, it just, I don't know. I feel like that's so fair for her to have reacted that way. Given that, that part of the video was definitely like, way more of a me thing than it was a her thing. I was like making that much more of a big deal than what it was, like based on, my need to like mother and coddle people. You know what I'm saying? Like that's definitely a me thing. That's definitely also coming from dark feminine energy, I feel. And so, like I do think it was totally fair for her to have reacted the way that she reacted, just based on, the ways that I think I was contributing to, my video, like maybe not coming across the best and like maybe not, landing with her like, well, like I think it could have been a lot worse. I think I could have worded things a lot worse. Like, like I think I tried my very, very, very best considering the situation I was in. But like, good intentions aren't always good enough. Sometimes like you have the best intentions in the world and you're just looking for relief from your suffering, but you cannot, like you cannot use your intentions as an excuse to diminish the impact of your actions. And I understand how, some of the things I said may have impacted her, and how, particularly, like it was fair for her to get upset based on, some of the things I said in that video, no matter like how nicely I tried to word it, no matter like what my intention was, like at the end of the day, like that obviously impacted her in not a good way. And I own that, I contributed to that. Like I see how I contributed to, her not responding super well to that. And so, like I definitely take responsibility for, at least some of the way she reacted. Like I think some of the way she reacted was definitely on me. And if I had to summarize what I think like all of these things that, maybe made her reaction kind of fair have in common, is that I think these are essentially all the ways that I was bringing in shit from my past into this situation and making the situation way worse based on, like me kind of like obviously getting hurt in the situation. I don't want to take away from the fact that, her making the choice to like not communicate things to me before all this went down, wasn't the best move, particularly given that, like I think she doesn't necessarily preempt how other people are going to feel super well. Like I think, in that situation, like I think communication just for the sake of cautiousness is probably a very good idea. But like I'm not to take away from like that hurt, because I think I'm like totally valid in that part of the hurt, that she didn't communicate and kind of like, kind of put me in a bit of a emotionally and mentally dangerous situation through that choice. At the same time, all the extra shit that I brought into it and all the ways that I made that reality mean so many things and like brought so many like kind of used that situation to like bring so much of my pain into the situation that I then think that, I think I kind of was like, in a way, like looking for her to take responsibility for like all the pain from my past that other people have hurt me with. Like, like a lot of the resentment has to do with, me having been stuck in anxious avoidant loops with other people in the past. From me having like been in relationships where I'm over depositing and under withdrawing, from me being in relationships where people have kind of thrown me under the bus, like a lot of, how big that situation got had to do with me bringing stuff from my past into the situation, like all of my like hurt kind of like getting entangled in the situation. And so I think it was fair for her to be upset about the stuff that, was essentially the hurt that other people like created. And, the way that I was kind of like going about talking about my pain, like I think, yeah, it like definitely could be construed as like me trying to make her take accountability for the pain that other people have put me through. And to be honest, I think that's probably one of the big advantages of this situation, in the, like the sense that I think it's like really taught me like, what's the difference between, like me addressing things that are hurting me that are like very like valid and like based on the present situation, and what's me dragging all my shit into the situation. Which I think, we've definitely done on both sides. Like there's definitely been times where I think, the roles were definitely reversed, where I felt like, Carrie was bringing in so much stuff from her past into like her pain. And yeah, in a similar way, trying to make me take accountability for like all the shit that her exes did to her. You know what I'm saying? Like there's definitely been moments like that. And I think it just happens in like kind of emotionally high stakes moments when, things get triggered and like you get your emotional wounds like open back up. Yeah, I think like on both sides, like there's definitely been times where I've been, like obviously hurt and like needing repair, but at the same time, then like bringing stuff from my past into it that I'm trying to make her accountable for. And then vice versa. Like there's definitely been times where, she's been validly hurt and I've done something that I'm like, yeah, I see that. Like that was, not cool. But then, yeah, she sometimes like from, like how I'm receiving it is, it seems like she's trying to make me accountable for the ways that her exes have hurt her. You know what I'm saying? Like I think, like one of the advantages of this experience is it's really taught me the difference between like, addressing your hurt with someone and, like where you're kind of making that hurt like a much bigger deal because you're dragging shit from your past into it. And, I think as soon as you do that, like people have some sort of like intuition of like where shit's not fair. Like I've definitely said that to her a few times where I'm like, kind of feel like you try, like I'm paying for other people's crimes right now. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it's seeming like to me. And, I think it was the same with the Errors of Us situation. Like I think, she was starting to get punished for other people's crimes. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying this situation's necessarily been great. And there's obviously been things that, have hurt me about this situation. But, overall, like much more of the hurt has been, stuff that's resurfaced from past relationships than it has had anything to do with her at the end of the day. Like when I look back at the situation, like a lot of the time I'm like, did she do anything wrong though? You know what I'm saying? Like most of the time I'm like, really didn't do anything wrong. Like a lot of the time, like really, like she, like overall, like aside, like the situation as it's set up is obviously hurtful, but like really she hasn't done anything that bad to hurt me in this situation, other than, the fact that the situation exists and she didn't communicate leading into Errors of Us. Like at the end of the day, like those are the only two like proper, like, like big issues. Pretty much like other than that, like most of the hurt that I've experienced in this situation has to do with shit from my past. Like that's where most of the pain is coming from. It's coming from, shit being triggered from my past, rather than necessarily coming from her. And, I would hazard a guess that it's probably vice versa for her. Like I've probably only done a few things that have actually hurt. And yeah, I think overall, most of, the pain on her side is probably very similar in the sense that it's coming from stuff coming up from her past. Like that's the reality of the situation. And it like took me a long time to get there, because obviously like when you're in it, you're in it. Like it's so hard to see the forest from the trees when you're like triggered, and you have to kind of like get out of it before you can look back with 2020 hindsight and you're like, oh, I was like bringing so much stuff into the situation. I think it's been a little bit harder on my side to not bring stuff into the situation, because there's been so much more ambiguity on my side. Like there's so much more room for me to like drag shit in there. So yeah, like it has been really hard to like see where that's been the situation where, you know, I've been dragging stuff from my past into the situation. But yeah, like I think that's the majority of like actually where all the hurt was kind of like taking place in this situation. A lot of it was, you know, the circumstances of the situation triggering stuff more so than anything else. And the thing is, like, I don't actually want her to take accountability for like the pain that other people have incurred from my past, like consciously. I think, you know, like obviously when I'm looking for that, I'm doing it subconsciously, and vice versa. I think when she's looking for me to take accountability for the ways that all the girls before me hurt her, like she's doing it subconsciously. I don't think it's a conscious thing. But yeah, like in my conscious mind, I'm like, yeah, I don't want that. Like, I think it's so valid for us to, you know, like validate each other's feelings and like, you know, understand each other's pasts and like why certain things hurt. Like, I think it's so fair for, you know, her to be like, yeah, like I get why this situation was really hurtful, and why it brought up a lot of stuff and why you're in pain. And like, I totally get that, because, you know, based on your past, like what other feelings would you have been in? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so, you know, like fine for us to do that for each other. And, you know, that in itself, I think is very healing. But like, you know, that's, you know, I think all we can ask from each other, you know what I'm saying, is to like, you know, like see and hear each other in each other's pain from the past, and just like kind of hold that with each other, and process that with each other. But yet, like, without trying to make each other take accountability for, you know, the shit that other people from our past didn't take accountability for. Like, the, you know, like, I know it like hurts me that like people from my past didn't own the ways that they hurt me. I assume it's the same way for Carrie, that people from her past didn't necessarily own the ways that they hurt her. But yeah, like I think consciously I'm not looking for that with her. I think subconsciously sometimes, you know, you just kind of go there a little bit. Like I think that's a little bit human, that, you know, like when you start dragging all the pain from your past into the situation, like you get like a little bit tangled up in it and like forget that your person like didn't actually do that to you. Like it feels real in the moment. But yeah, like, yeah, I think, you know, most of that pain that hasn't been processed just needs to be like seen and held in, you know, like a safe kind of container, which I do feel like ultimately is this connection. Like it does feel like that kind of like safe, loving container. So yeah, like I think that's all I can ask of this connection, is to like be the place where that pain gets like seen and healed. And like asking anything else of her is like, first of all, not what I want, but also like just not fair. That's like all well and good for me to say in these moments where I'm like good and I've got the 2020 hindsight and I've like, you know, processed whatever was coming up and like kind of worked through it. But you know, like the shit thing is like, no matter how kind of like clear and calm and like peaceful, and yeah, like certain Carrie makes me, at the end of the day, because this situation is like set up for a lot of, you know, ambiguity, given that we can't talk. And it's also like fundamentally like unsafe in terms of our mental and emotional well-being, because whether we, you know, meant to or not, we got like very, very attached, very, very connected. What each other does in the world is going to affect us. But, you know, we are not in a situation that's like viable to like repair hurt when it occurs. And then also like, because we are two individuals just with so much stuff that has gone unrepaired from past relationships, like, you know, no matter how strong that is and no matter like how much that energy runs underneath, like everything going on, like when I have a lot of stuff going on and the situation is like making it impossible to like process things like well with each other, like, you know, it's kind of like these two things can get so loud that this is like really hard to access. And it's like very hard to stay grounded when that happens, which was, you know, essentially the situation with Errors of Us. Like, my stuff was so loud, the situation itself was like deeply unhealthy. And it was like, this started to get very, very, very quiet, to the point where, you know, like, it was like a fucking whisper, you know what I'm saying? Like, I really had to strain my fucking ear to like stay connected to this feeling. And there was definitely moments where I was fucking losing it. And, you know, like starting to like tie this sort of stuff up with Carrie instead of like being able to keep her separate from, you know, my stuff and, you know, kind of the circumstances of the situation we're in. Essentially, I think, you know, we both would have had to have been like unrealistically, like superhuman evolved to have been able to have handled that situation any differently than the way that we ended up handling it. Like, I'm not at all surprised that we both did not react super well to each other, just like given the reality of what's going on, because it is so like well and good for me to be able to stay connected to this feeling of like calm certainty, like, you know, peace, and like clarity with Carrie, in like kind of fine moments like now with 2020 hindsight when I'm looking back at this. But at the time, like when I had so much of my own stuff being triggered, particularly all in one go, like, you know, like everything hit me at once. Like, this is essentially like a perfect storm of just like all of my past pain, just like, like, like showing itself, coming back up. Plus like the circumstances of the situation, like us not being able to speak, and deal with things, you know, probably in the most efficient way, I would say, would just be to like bring it up with each other. But because we could not talk and we are like deeply, you know, attached and connected, and what each other does in the world like deeply affects each of us, like, you know, the situation itself was like a shit show in terms of like trying to move through it. And then like we both have like so much stuff that I think was getting triggered on both sides in that situation. Like, of course this was going to be like difficult to access, and, you know, like for that reason, like I don't blame either of us for like having the reactions we were having. Like, I just think, you know, the combination of like the situation plus we are just two humans with stuff, with baggage, trying to deal with it, you know, in a, you know, fundamentally like not super safe situation for, you know, each other's mental and emotional well-being. Like, kind of like, of course it went the way it went. Like, I wouldn't have expected it to go any other way. So essentially, like, back to the story, that's where we are in the story. Like, I didn't react super well to Errors of Us, which, you know, I think is understandable given the circumstances of the situation. And then Carrie also didn't react very well to my reaction, which again, I think was understandable given the circumstances of the situation. And, you know, like obviously at the time, like given that I was still very much in all my stuff and like really, you know, still like struggling to try and like re-find her and re-find our connection and re-find that kind of like clarity and certainty that I was like definitely like at least losing at the time. Like I had a very loose grip on it at the time. Yeah, like given that, you know, like her reaction obviously did hurt me a lot. I was like very hurt to see that reaction, even though, you know, like I wasn't necessarily not expecting it. Like I knew that, you know, even if I had brought up everything that I needed to bring up in that conversation, even if I'd done that textbook by the book perfectly or as well as possible given the circumstances, like I still knew that it was going to be, you know, hard for her to receive, even if I did do it well. And I had a feeling that, you know, like based on the state I was in, that I was not going to do that perfectly. So yeah, like even though I was kind of expecting her to not react super well, it did hurt my feelings. But I guess because I was, you know, kind of expecting it, I did kind of, you know, yeah, like I didn't stay in that hurt for super long, that, you know, she didn't react well to my reaction. At the time, I was kind of like more taking it as like, okay, well, you know, I'm deeply hurt and I know I'm probably not, you know, handling everything perfectly right now because I'm really hurt. But yeah, if, you know, she's not like meeting me with the energy that I need to be met with right now, I feel like that's kind of giving me an answer, because obviously I left the how I'm doing video off on this kind of like, you know, kind of like the main thing that I was kind of confused about in the situation, which was, you know, no matter how kind of like clear I felt about her, like the reality of the situation was so confusing. And, you know, like I was really holding on to vibes in kind of this regard. Like I wasn't really holding on to anything solid. And, you know, like I was questioning whether I would have to let this go for the sake of, you know, my own sanity at the time. Because, you know, based on all this stuff going on, I was really just not in a good place, and I just didn't think that I could handle anymore. So yeah, seeing her reaction, like more just like the fact that I didn't feel loved in the reaction that I got, I didn't feel seen and heard in the reaction that I got, that was definitely making me lean more towards removing myself. The thing was, like, I wanted to be just so certain of that choice before I made the move, just because, you know, like, unfortunately, I can't remove like how I think other people are going to feel when I, you know, do things from my decision-making process. You know what I'm saying? Which is, you know, I think, you know, a strength of mine that I don't think Carrie necessarily has. And yeah, like, you know, she has strengths in other areas for sure. So, you know, like I was just making like so sure of like making sure I was so sure before I made like a move. But yeah, like definitely how she reacted when I didn't kind of get the love and like feeling seen and feeling validated that I really needed, I was definitely leaning more towards yeah, like removing myself from the situation for the sake of my own sanity. But yeah, I just wanted to be 1,000% certain on that, because I knew that if I was to remove myself again, I'd have to like fully quit and like become so unreachable that, you know, like, yeah, the music industry could never reach me. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, like I would have to like create like a really clean break, not only for myself, but also just knowing that, you know, like if I didn't create a clean break, I knew that that would, you know, bring up a lot of stuff for Carrie, and she would have a really, really, really hard time. And yeah, that would really not be good and exacerbate a lot of things for her, a lot of pain from her past. If, you know, I started this like going backwards and forwards cycle again, like I just knew that that would not be good for her. So I needed to be like 1,000% certain of what I was doing, because, you know, like, yeah, I couldn't remove how, yeah, like my decision might affect her from my decision-making process. Like I was probably being way, way, way more cautious and way, way, way more careful and wanting to be like way, way, way more certain of my choice before I made it, mostly for the fact of like, I was extremely concerned about how my choice would affect her. And so, yeah, I was just like, I have to be 1,000% certain, because if I'm gone, I'm gone. Like, I'm not doing the backwards and forwards thing for her, like with her. Like, I'm not doing, like, I cannot in good conscience do that to her. And, you know, like, I just know, like, that would start to tear her up inside and, like, bring up so much stuff from her past. And, yeah, like, I think that would eat her alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, the ambiguity, the backwards and forwards, I was just like, that's not happening. And I have to do everything in my power to, like, either, you know, commit and stay or go. Like the like backwards and forwards thing is just like, for me, that was like a big like no. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like, when I was, you know, trying to make a decision, like that was definitely at the forefront of my mind, like really thinking about how it would affect her emotionally. And so I knew that, you know, I had to be like totally out or totally in. There was, yeah, going to be no like pussyfooting around. So yeah, like that was, yeah, definitely, you know, kind of where I was coming from at the time, and just like needing to be like so sure. Like it was, you know, definitely a little bit for me in terms of like wanting to give myself a clean break, but also for her in terms of like making sure that I wasn't causing her any unnecessary pain based on, you know, what her trigger points were. Like, yeah, I knew I needed for her sake, I would need to like either do it or not do it, and just be like 1,010% committed to like whichever decision I made. And so again, that was like, yeah, a big driver in terms of me needing to be like just 1,000% certain. Obviously, because yeah, like I had, you know, taken her reaction to lean me more towards that direction, but I hadn't necessarily like reached a place where I was like fully like certain that that was the move that I was making. I obviously made one kind of like last attempt, I would say, at trying to yeah, like salvage the situation so that, you know, like I wouldn't necessarily need to choose that thing, even though it was becoming like more and more like appealing. It seemed like more and more of the right choice at the time. Yeah, like I obviously, you know, to be frank, was being a little bit of a pick-me in the sense of like, you know, giving her another shot. Yeah, essentially I made this TikTok video, which was like, you know, pointing out that, you know, like her criticism was very valid. Like, you know, like I was looking back and I was like, you know, when I dipped, I probably should have stayed dipped. You know what I'm saying? Just for the sake of like my own sanity. Like I could tell that the situation was not good for me. It was a little bit of a pick me move to like come back at all. You know what I'm saying? Even though I did have the universe kind of like sending me lots of signs to go back. Like at the end of the day, still kind of a pick me girl move. You know what I'm saying? And the fact that I even gave her a chance to like, you know, see, hear and validate after the Errors of Us situation, you know, I think a different girly would have just dipped, you know what I'm saying? So like at the same time, I was like, you know, even though obviously she didn't react super well and, you know, her TikTok was a bit mean, I was like, at the same time, kind of valid though, because, you know, like, like I saw her point, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, so essentially I made this TikTok and I was like, look, it's not like you don't have a point. Like you do have a point. Like I have been a pick-me in the sense that I've like not gone, like I've really wanted to, and I felt like the situation was not good for me and I haven't gone. Like, yes, that is pick-me behavior. You can't hurt me with valid criticism that I've accepted about myself, because I think that is totally true. Like I should have gone when I went the first time. I should have just stayed gone. I shouldn't have come back to like experience Errors of Us and get hurt. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, you have a fucking point. And then I was like, at the same time though, this situation is fucking toxic. And you know, like if you want me to stay around, which, you know, I did have a feeling that she wanted me to, you know what I'm saying? Like when I dipped, she kind of didn't let me stay dipped, you know what I'm saying? Like she was making an effort to try and get me to stick around. So like, I feel like, yeah, maybe I was a little bit of a pick-me, but sometimes she do be doing fuckboy shit like that, you know what I'm saying? And so I was, yeah, essentially in this TikTok talking about, yeah, like, you know, are we like, I don't think either of us are like acting super good right now, but I want to get out of it, but I can't do it alone. You know what I'm saying? Like we have to like commit to like getting out of like whatever we're doing right now together. Essentially, I was like, you know, we can work out this like fuckboy and pick me shit out in the bedroom. Like we can lock ourselves in a room and let our demons go ham on each other. Like, you know, there are other ways to deal with that, you know, energy that's coming out in both of us right now, other than, you know, letting this situation get toxic, which, you know, that's what it was feeling like to me at the time based on where I was standing. Like it definitely didn't feel like super healthy. And I know that, you know, the majority of that was being caused by, you know, a combination of the situation and both of us having a lot of stuff coming up. But at the time, like, you know, I was still very much in it at the time. I couldn't really see the forest from the trees. So yeah, like again, I was tying up a lot with her. So yeah, essentially that's what that TikTok was about. I was like, it doesn't have to be this way. We can work it out in the bedroom. Like, but you know, like the way everything's looking to me right now is it looks super fucking toxic. Looks like you're being a fuck boy and I'm being a pick me, and I'm owning that, yeah, I'm being a pick me in this situation. But like, you know, are you going to own that you're like also being a bit of a dick right now? You're being a fuck boy right now? Because, you know, essentially if you're not, that's definitely going to make me lead more towards yeeting myself out of the situation. So yeah, that was kind of like the gist of that TikTok, that, yeah, I used to like respond to, you know, her reaction. I don't know exactly what it was about that video that maybe made some things land a little bit better, or like reclarified some things, or like, I don't know what, but yeah, like Carrie was then off social media for like 4 days, but when she came back, she was definitely night and day different, like definitely came back with a different attitude and seemed much more intent on, you know, like actually showing up in a way that was conducive to us like resolving some of the, you know, not seeing eye to eye that was happening at the time. Which, you know, I really appreciated, because while I think there was some totally valid, you know, things that she like very validly reacted to when she didn't react super well to my reaction to Errors of Us, at the same time, like, I think, you know, just based on the situation, like, I was definitely way more in the dark. There was definitely a lot more ambiguity on my side. There was a lot more space for like my stuff to be coming up. And, like I was in a position where I was like really, really hurt and confused and triggered and just like really didn't have anything to hold on to. I was really like holding on to vibes and smoke and whispers. So yeah, like I was having a really hard time. I really needed her to show up for me, like with that energy, and to kind of like put her pride aside. And, no matter like how much valid stuff she had to like react to in terms of my reaction, at the same time, like, yeah, I was just like in a really, really, really shitty position. And I just kind of did need her to come through and like really, participate in kind of turning it around and, making me feel a bit better, so that, we could, get to a place where I was like at least like calm enough that I could then like try and refine like the calm and clarity in her again, and have, my stuff like not be so loud, and have the like objective reality of the situation we're in like be affecting me so much. Like, I really didn't kind of need her to turn it around. And that basically from then on, like she was, definitely intent on like trying to turn things around with me, so that, like, like this was like essentially the start of the redemption arc, the like resolution. So the first thing Carrie posts is this TikTok where she's having a little bit of a sad girl moment, being like, I'm going to start 2024 single, and that's my cross to bear, like based on kind of like the vibes and the music and the filter. But I definitely, like when I saw this, like had a little spidey sense go off, like based on, the filter kind of alluding to the new year, the start of the new year, and the little caption being like check back for updates. That made me like that definitely set my spidey senses off that something was coming around New Year's. And it did take me a little while to like comment back on that video, just because I was obviously still not in the best place post Errors of Us, and a lot of my fears and anxieties weren't like addressed yet. So, like I was still in a pretty, kind of not good place, especially just given how she reacted to me, and, all the things that I was thinking about because of that. So it took me about 5 days after she posted the video to eventually comment back. So the next song's coming out around New Year. So the next song's going to start being leaked around New Year's then, based on, this TikTok. That's what I was gathering was happening. And, within an hour, I think about 45 minutes after I commented that, even though the TikTok was 5 days old, she like got on TikTok and made a new TikTok to one of Sabrina Carpenter's songs that essentially goes, like it's Christmas time, but I wish it was the first, because all these couples that I'm seeing are like making me depressed. And so obviously based on the combination of these two TikToks, on the combination of the I'll start 2024, check back for updates, and, it's Christmas, but I wish it was New Year's TikToks, I gathered that something was coming around New Year's, like based on her responses and her speedy responses. I was like, obviously she wants me to know something's coming. And so at this point I'm like, okay, like, she's saying that something's coming in a week. I can sit tight and like see what she has to say. And, like I kind of gathered based on, those two TikToks that, she did really want me to, see or hear whatever it was that was coming. Particularly given that, like at this point, like we're not following each other on TikTok. So she literally has to like check her TikTok notifications, and like scroll through looking for me, and looking for my comments. And so, I was kind of like, all right, if she's, kind of sitting there waiting for me to like, connect with her in some way, like I think the least I can do is like give her a week and listen to whatever she has to say, whatever it is that she wants me to hear. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna hear her out. And I think something that happened after that was like super, super redeeming, was that the next day, on Christmas Day in Australia, she uploaded 2 Instagram stories where she was talking about, like Christmas is, a bit of a funky time. Like if it's a good time, I see you. If it's not, I see you. If it's, so, like I see you, like, and obviously, based on some of the things I said in my how I'm doing video about, not feeling particularly seen, when she uploaded that, like, I'm not going to lie, that helped a lot. Like, as soon as I felt seen, like, I was like much happier to like sit tight and like wait and see what she had to say. Because again, like, I do be girly brain like that. I just like need to, feel seen and validated in my feelings. Like, I don't necessarily need you to fix the problem. Like, as long as you're like at least validating how I feel. And I knew that was what the code was when, she uploaded that particular story. And, I will say, like, one of the better things to come out of the whole Eras of Us fiasco was that, yeah, like, I think we did get really clear on, how my brain works, how her brain works, like what I need when I'm upset and what she needs when she's upset. And, like, she's definitely learned to see, hear, and validate first, which has, changed the way, we get into like tussles. Like, we've had way, way, way less tussles because I've felt way more seen. And, when she makes sure that that's the priority, like, there's much less of a problem. I'm going to be real with you. Essentially, the second she uploaded this story and I saw that she was, talking about kind of seeing and hearing people, that changed some stuff for me. That made me feel like way more kind of like safe and secure with her. That, like, I obviously felt a lot more seen and heard now that, she was like, making sure that I knew that, she was seeing and hearing me in the only way that she could communicate that, which, I was still kind of annoyed that this was the way that she was communicating things based on, just being annoyed that the restrictions were what they were. But at the end of the day, like, I was obviously also appreciating that she was making an effort to be like, no, I do see you. Particularly given that, she'd not reacted super well in the moment. I think it was important for her to turn that around and just be like, no, I do see you. And yeah, like, that changed a lot for me. That made me feel a lot more secure in the connection, just for the fact that I felt, like, validated by her doing that, which, definitely helped me be like a lot more open to her and open to hearing her out, and open to kind of sitting tight for, a week until New Year's to like hear what she had to say, and which in whatever the song was that was coming out or starting to get leaked around that time. And it did turn out that, like, it seemed like she couldn't kind of, wait. It seemed like she, got a little bit impatient maybe because, a few days early she ended up leaking this soundbite from Lead Me On onto her TikTok. And as soon as she leaked it, I knew she'd leaked it early because I was like, she wouldn't have told me the first if, she was going to leak it in a few days anyway. I think based on the fact that, I didn't really respond and was just kind of like sitting and waiting and just seeing what would happen. I was like, yeah, she might want me to like hear what the song is. And I'm not going to lie, when I first heard that soundbite of the song, I was like a little bit salty, not super impressed. I was just like, because obviously she was talking about like someone leading her on. And I was like, excuse me, if anyone in this situation should be salty about being led on, I think that would be the person who's not heard a fucking word from the other person. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, this feels a little bit rich. So like, I didn't have a great first reaction to it. Granted, like, she did look really hot in the clip, and that was very redeeming. And that was like, she's so hot, but she also annoys me a little bit with some of the stuff that she says. Like, I cannot believe her with the audacity to say that. Like, yeah, I was like a little bit, kind of annoyed at first listen. Obviously, after a while, I just like was able to put myself in her shoes, and like, I obviously knew that the song was old and she would have written it around the time that I was dipping. So of course she was having all these feelings. And, then when I was able to like see it from her point of view, I was like, I get the song. I get, the place that she was in when she wrote it. I get that it's, coming from like more of like wounded inner child energy. And yeah, like, that was the genuine place she was in. That was the genuine feeling. And, like, I totally get where she was coming from. Didn't react to it super well in the moment, but, like, after a little bit, I was like, yeah, like, I do get it. And, if you ignore the context of the situation for a second, like, if you ignore that, like, the context of the situation is like obviously not a good situation for me to be in, and I should very much want to remove myself, just given that, it's almost impossible in this situation to like not get hurt. Like, of course I should want to remove myself from this situation. Like, when you ignore that context and just, solely focus on what's happening between her and I, at the same time, like I see a point, I feel like, the song was a little bit valid, even particularly given like the moment we're in, you know what I'm saying? Like right there in the moment, the context aside, like I was considering dipping. I was definitely considering removing myself from the situation. So, like if you remove the context and just look at it that way, like the song, very valid, you know what I'm saying? And very appropriate for the moment we're in, like that we're in a moment where, like I was like thinking about dipping, because, like obviously I was getting really, really hurt, and, the situation just didn't feel good, didn't feel healthy, felt like a lose-lose, for me. But yeah, like ignoring the context, like it was kind of a very fitting song for the moment at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like, like I did get it. I was like, when you ignore the context, like I get that like literally what's happening between us right now, like is upsetting you. Like I do get that. I do get that, from where you're standing, because, like I think this whole time she's had a better time with, kind of like accepting that the situation is what it is. Like I've had moments where I'm like, it is what it is. But at the same time, like, especially because there's so much ambiguity on my side and so much so much I'm in the dark about, like, I don't know the full context of the situation. I'm kind of like putting the puzzle pieces together. I've had a little bit of a harder time being like, the situation is what it is. Music industry's going to do what it's going to do. And I think, based on that, like, I think it's been a little bit easier for her to write songs about the feelings she's in the moment. Whereas, for me, I get upset about, the situation we're in a lot more, rather than necessarily getting upset about, like what's going on with us a little bit. I get fixated on like, but we wouldn't be in this situation if this, entity didn't exist and they didn't operate this way. And, like if she's like able to kind of like accept that, the situation is what it is, and she's like just focusing more on the dynamic between her and I, like I do get Lead Me On in terms of, her feeling like I'm like distant and pulling away. Like actually, like what I'm trying to distance myself from is the situation, and it just so happens that, she's so inextricably linked with the situation that it's impossible for me to like remove myself from the situation without removing myself from her. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all kind of go together in this situation. I can't do one without the other. Like that's the whole fucking issue. Like I can't have you because, there's this whole kind of like fabricated situation around us, not being able to like be together right now, even though we've, fallen in love, like that's the fucking issue. And, like I see where she's coming from in terms of, if she's just focusing on the dynamic that we're in and kind of like ignoring the context, I get her being upset about like me distancing myself. But like for me, I can't ignore the context. And, I can't ignore that the situation's, hurting me, because it is really hurting me. Like it sucks to be on the side where, there's way more ambiguity on my side, way more darkness. Like I would have loved to have been getting like led on with as much as she was getting, you know what I'm saying? Like I was like, if you were in my DMs like every goddamn day, like I know at this point I wasn't actually reaching out, but previously I had been in her DMs like every day saying stuff, and like I was posting about her just about every day too. Like I was like, I would die for that, you know what I'm saying? Like I would love to be led on with that much stuff. Like I'm getting led on with, cryptic messages here. And that was basically the crux of like what I ended up messaging her, like after I'd heard the first snippet of Lead Me On. Like at this point, obviously, like we weren't, communicating behind the scenes. We hadn't communicated properly behind the scenes since I dipped in August. Like I'd obviously sent her that message when Heiress of Us dropped. And then I think this was like the very next message that I sent her. I sent her a message and I was like, the song hurt my feelings because like, where I'm coming from is that, like me distancing myself is an act of like me trying to protect myself and me trying to take care of myself in the situation. And, I'm like based on what you've said in the song, like I feel not like that's not being appreciated. And yeah, it like the way I'm receiving it, I said something like the way I'm receiving it is that you don't want to be close to me because, like I want to be able to be close to you, but, like the situation itself is not healthy and it creates, hurt and resentment, which makes me feel more emotionally distant from you. And, like me trying to distance myself is like me trying not to, bring my own hurt and resentment into our connection and turn it toxic. And, start to feel more emotionally distant from you. Like, yeah, it's just like, it's just as much about me protecting me as it is about me protecting like the connection that we have. And so that I'm not kind of like sitting in a world of hurt that I'm then bringing into this connection, that, is like would become toxic and like poison the connection that we have. You know what I'm saying? Like I said something along the lines of that, like it even like like her saying that I'm running away from her made me feel like, yeah, she didn't want to be close to me, because yeah, like me trying to, yeah, like be emotionally close to, like I couldn't be emotionally close to her in this situation because the situation's not good for me. You know what I'm saying? Like I lose either way. Like, like I either stay in the situation, I get really hurt and then I feel emotionally distant from you anyway, or I can try and take a step back and try and like take care of myself and, try not to, hurt the connection that we have by, how hurt I am in the situation. So essentially I was in a bit of a place of like not feeling super seen again. Like I felt like my intentions weren't coming across to her and like that, like I wasn't being seen in, how much I wanted to be emotionally close to her. And, the fact that we could not be together because of the situation was hurting me, which was making me bring a toxicity into the connection. Like it was making me bring lots of hurt and resentment, which was just poisoning the connection. And so me distancing myself was not only good for me because I don't want to be carrying around that energy personally, but then also like I didn't want to bring that energy to her either because I cared too much about her. And I cared too much about our connection to be, like let my hurt kind of poison it that way. Like, yeah, I was definitely not feeling seen in that, and like that being the experience that I was in when I first heard the first snippet of Lead Me On. So I was like super, not happy with the song the minute I saw it, because I was just like, this is just making me feel not seen again. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it took me a little while until I kind of did, the mental gymnastics to like really try and put my shit aside, and just, focus on, like, obviously how she was feeling when she was singing the song originally, which would have been when I was originally dipping, and that was like bringing up stuff for her. And, obviously most of that probably had nothing to do with me and had a lot to do with shit that was being triggered from her past, like from her previous relationships in her childhood, which, I've kind of gathered, like there's been lots of times where the feminines felt like distant and unreachable to her in her life, particularly based on Lead Me On, but I already had my suspicions before the song dropped. Like then, like it took me a while, but eventually I got to a place of like, really being able to hear that it was like a song that was written from like a hurt inner child that, like felt like the feminine was distant and hard to reach. Yeah. And like, an energy that, she had a bit of a habit of chasing maybe. And, like eventually I got to a place where I'm like, oh, she's just trying to be like seen and heard and recognized and loved by the feminine the same way that I'm kind of like doing that with the masculine, in terms of like wanting to be seen, heard and loved. Like really we were doing the same thing, you know what I'm saying? It was just that, each other were like triggering stuff from each other's past. And so, yeah, like eventually I came to that place, but obviously in the moment, like I was not evolved enough to see it like that in the moment. In the moment, I just like, yeah, was again starting to feel a little bit unseen. Basically, I spent like all of December and pretty much all of January just like flip-flopping between kind of like two states, like kind of like sometimes I'd go back to that kind of like feeling that I'd had about Carrie like ever since the start, like that kind of like trust and knowing and like feeling of the one and, like all that sort of stuff. But then I was like flip-flopping from there into like, just basically all my fears and anxieties that, you know, I have based on a lot of my history, you know what I'm saying? Like lots of stuff from past relationships coming up, lots of like things coming up from people kind of fucking me over like a couple of times. And yeah, just like lots of like lack of trust and like, you know, feeling unseen and like all that sort of stuff from past relationships. Like very much in December and January, I was like flip-flopping between those two things, just like so much. It took me so long to kind of like steady and like come back to this. It'd be like a little bit of this and then, you know, something would happen. I'd kind of get triggered and I'd go back into that. And I think the thing that made it so goddamn hard was that I just had so little to hold on to. Like I just, again, was holding on to like smoke whispers, like, you know, vibes. Like I had such little concrete 3-dimensional like evidence to like hold on to. Like I had some, but like just nowhere near enough that, you know, a human, you know, that was in this deep with another human being like should have. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like this, like in December and January, God, was I like regretting the whole situation. I was like, I should have walked away when I didn't know an end date. You know what I'm saying? Like when I didn't have like pen and paper, like, you know, like this will all be over by this day. Like I should have walked my ass out of there. You know what I'm saying? Like definitely in December and January, I was sitting in a lot of regret for that. And I was just like, I cannot believe I was so naive at the start to just assume that people would know how to do their fucking jobs and would like, I just assumed people wouldn't have let what happened happen. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, I assumed that someone would know, like, you know, like would have some sort of like marketing and PR like expertise and would have been like, yeah, that's a shit show. Don't create that scenario at the very least. But, you know, like I'd hoped for a little bit of like fucking empathy and just like hoped not to be put in this situation. I just assumed that it would all be over by, you know, like, to be honest, earlier than my birthday, much earlier than my birthday. I thought they were like silly for letting it carry on more than 6 months, to be honest. So yeah, like that was naive of me to have assumed people working behind the scenes knew how to do their job and would have pulled the pin for the sake of, you know, that was obviously what you should have done. Like genuinely, like no one should have been put in the situation I've been put in. Like that just seems silly. That seems like careless. And, you know, like, of course I was going to end up going through all this stuff. Like, I don't know how I lasted as long as I did before, you know, I ended up in this like very turbulent place where I'm like flip-flopping between, you know, like having moments of security, but so many moments of like, you know, doubt and, you know, just like all my shit coming up and just like not being in a super, you know, healthy situation to like try and deal with it. Like that was like a goddamn fucking nightmare. Like I'm just, of course I'm going to be so fucking mad that, you know, this situation was allowed to happen because it's just should never have been allowed to happen, to be honest. And, you know, like now, obviously, if I had my time again at the start of this situation, I'd be like, yeah, of course people are going to be money hungry and we'll let this go on for, you know, however much time it needs to go on to like make the most money. But at the time I was just like assuming people had, you know, a scrap of empathy, and, you know, like wouldn't have, you know, literally exploited people and let people be in, like, let me and Carrie be in such an emotionally, you know, unsafe situation when we're just like so attached to each other. Like, yeah, that should never have been allowed to happen. Like, I can't believe people weren't empathizing with, you know, that being very obviously how the situation was going to pan out. Yeah, and yeah, I can't believe people didn't stop it early on. Like, that just seems dumb. I don't know how I lasted until kind of like well over a year in before I like had this like complete just like, you know, where I was like fucking losing it, you know what I'm saying? Where I was like flip-flopping between, you know, like all these feelings that I'd had during the whole experience, and then, you know, like a really intense period of like all my stuff coming up all at once, like all my demons, all the shit that I had buried. Yeah, like December and January, not a fucking good time. But anyway, I'm going to stop myself before this turns into another fucking rant because, you know, I could just rant about this forever. So yeah, I'm going to get back to the story. So anyway, back to the story. Essentially, she'd started leaking Lead Me On. I hadn't responded to it super well. I'd message her being like, yeah, I'm upset, essentially. And then she started posting things, I think, to try and make me feel better again. So the first thing she posted was the Instagram carousel for New Year's Eve, where she in the last slide was talking about, like it's been such a insane year of like pain and also growth. And then she posted this TikTok where she captioned it, "What's your highest self leading you towards?" And so, yeah, she was kind of like immediately leaning into like, basically like it's been really hard. I think, for her, I think it was particularly hard when she was like writing the songs like Lead Me On, Pretending, Joyride, all that sort of stuff in the middle of the previous year, when I'd, like hit my limit. Yeah, like very much kind of in the next few posts kind of alluding to, yeah, it's been so hard, but like also so fruitful, which I think was like her trying to remind me of like the positives, because I was like in a very dark place. And, like not going to lie, that did work a little bit, I think, thankfully, because, like we're both a bit neurodivergent. Like the story back and forth, like if I'm talking about, ways that I'm hurt, and then she's talking about, like that she's been hurt, like that does register as like her showing me that she's empathizing, you know what I'm saying, which I think was good. Like while I would prefer to like first hear, yeah, I understand why you're upset. Obviously I understand that there's limitations on the situation made that pretty hard. And so, yeah, like, I definitely took her posting those as kind of like empathizing that it's been a hard year, but also like acknowledging the ways that we'd both grown. At the time, like that was hard for me to like kind of take on board though, because I was not in a good place. Like I was probably in my darkest time, which I think mid the year before was when Carrie was in her darkest time potentially. So yeah, like a little, like I received it a little bit, but also a little bit I was just like, I'm just so like, I'm just like really not in a good place right now. So at the same time, like it was kind of landing, but kind of not. The good news was that when I saw this TikTok with, the red outfit, the gold jewelry, and like the kind of like flamey kind of like aesthetic on the jumper, like it did register to me as being reminiscent of, the Finding Rewilding playlist with the heart, which at the time I still had deleted, but yeah, like I did end up like unprivating everything when Lead Me On came out. But yeah, when I saw this TikTok, I did recognize it as like a nod to Finding Rewilding. And so then, based on her saying that, yeah, like, Lead Me On's kind of like, part of the what's her higher self leading her towards kind of trajectory, like, yeah, like because this did register as a Finding Rewilding hint clue, I did kind of like start to kind of put it together that she was obviously going to paint like a bit of a story, and that she was probably, following some sort of like promo plan to eventually, announce the Finding Rewilding album, which at the time I still thought was F2, not F3. So yeah, like that also definitely helped. Like when I saw, this TikTok and I was like, oh, she's going to announce Finding Rewilding. And it kind of also put the song into big picture perspective for me as well a little bit in that moment, because obviously like I heard the song, and like when you hear the song, it's just like very real and present. Like sometimes for the minute you hear it, you forget that a lot of the time it was written a long time before you've actually heard it. And that, like it was obviously part of like a bigger kind of like release plan, which, you just forget, you just get caught up in like what she's saying, especially because like I, had been waiting for her to say some things for so long. So yeah, like definitely this post helped in terms of like reminding me that it's part of like a bigger unfolding, and that it's heading all towards like Finding Rewilding coming out. Like that definitely, seeing this TikTok definitely helped remind me of that. And, like while that didn't magically fix everything, like, it was kind of providing a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, to like, help to pull me out of the kind of like hopelessness and dark and despair that I was in that moment. So she's posted this TikTok, obviously alluding to the Finding Rewilding Flaming Heart. I've immediately clocked it as a Finding Rewilding clue, and it's definitely put a lot in perspective for me and, like definitely helped a lot in that moment. And, I ended up posting like photos pointing out that she looks like the Finding Rewilding Flaming Heart on my TikTok as soon as I saw it. So same day that I saw it, I'm posting it on my TikTok that I've clocked it. And then the next day, the next TikTok she posts, like I think was supposed to be kind of like an add-on about what the Finding Rewilding album was going to entail. Like I think that's what the Easter egg was supposed to be, both for, obviously the fans, but then also for me, just to like remind me that, like everything that's coming out is like part of a plan to like tell a story and like get to the Finding Rewilding, album, which at the time, again, I thought was F2. Obviously it's F3, but the TikTok that she posted was this one, where she has a book that says notes on shape-shifting and there's butterflies on the cover. She opens it to a page that says how to heal from heartbreak. And she's obviously got, white fingernail polish when she's sifting through the book, which is, obviously a symbol of kind of like one relationship being released and going back to purity. So, she was kind of like telling me what the album was going to be about. It was going to be about the journey from the shape-shifting journey from, kind of caterpillar to butterfly, the journey to freedom, and all the healing, particularly healing from toxicity, given the caption. That's what this TikTok was supposed to be alluding to, that, the album's going to be about her healing from toxicity, her healing from her last heartbreak. That's why, Eras of Us came out. That's why, everything was going the way that it was going. And I'm not going to lie, this TikTok really, really, really helped, particularly given like some of the stuff I said in the How I'm Doing video, in that video about Eras of Us, because obviously I was talking about being concerned, particularly around, if she was like choosing to be apart from me, if it was coming from, like toxicity, if it was coming from her, like, thinking that she's the bad guy. And like, obviously I brought up a lot of stuff in that video that kind of like at this point, like hadn't really been addressed. But when she posted this TikTok, like to me, it definitely felt like it was, obviously kind of like alluding to what the whole Finding Rewilding album was going to be about. Obviously when I thought it was one album and not going to be split into two albums, that it was going to be about this whole, like caterpillar to butterfly, contained to free, like heartbreak to healing kind of like pipeline. But also it was like answering my questions from the How I'm Doing video. And it was kind of like, putting it into perspective and kind of being like, all my fears were valid, because literally that's the story she's telling. Like the story she's telling is like kind of all the heartbreak stuff, like all the pain, and like how she's like healed that, how she's alchemized it, and like turned it into, like healing, how she's been on her healing journey, away from, toxicity and towards, her highest self, her truest true, her freedom, like all that sort of stuff. Like this TikTok definitely helped a lot with that, and made me feel way, way, way better. But I'm not going to lie, the feeling didn't last, because like I disclaimed, this whole time I'm flip-flopping. Like she does one thing that makes me feel so much better, and then something else happens and I get triggered and I'm like back to not square one. Like I wasn't going all the way back, but I was kind of like flip-flopping, like from, kind of like trying to find some groundedness in this to like, like doubting it essentially. And, basically like what happened next is like this row of TikToks here that I just kind of need to explain like the lore with, the backstory of, for this to make sense of like why, I kind of ended up kind of flip-flopping a little bit in this moment. Okay, so the backstory for the next row of TikToks was, started all the way back before Eras of Us dropped, when, Shannon obviously like left the kisses to my exes who don't give a shit about me little soundbite at the end of one of her clips for her podcast before it had come out. And, like when I saw that, I obviously figured that it was probably to try and get under Carrie's skin, given that I know that that's a trigger point of hers. And yeah, at the time, that obviously didn't work because Carrie then posted a TikTok where she was using the same sound. She like ignored the, kisses to my exes line, did a little bit of an eye roll moment, and then mouthed the words to the next line, which was kisses to the next one who thinks they can't live without me. So like, this is the timeline. Obviously, like that that response wasn't the response I'm assuming that Shannon was hoping for, given that, the very next thing that she did to respond to Carrie, kind of like giving the little eye roll moment and then just talking about how she'd literally moved on. Shannon posted a TikTok. In the TikTok, she's displaying pretty aggressive body language anytime people raise their hands up anywhere over their head, and anytime people are like jutting their chin forward and out, it's like usually very like aggressive territorial kind of body language, like think like mama bear like protecting her cubs kind of aggressive body language. Like that was very much the vibe, and the sound she used was something about I've been protecting my peace by not saying anything, which again, like based on being coupled with some aggressive body language, did come across as, trying to be threatening, to be real with you. And so obviously when I saw that, I was like, no, like I'd stayed out of it as much as I humanly could up until this point. But I'm like, no, wait, if you're going to like threaten here, like I'm intervening, like I don't care anymore. I'm stepping in. I'm going to be real with you. Like anyone threatens her, like that'll be the last fucking thing you do. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not here for that for a fucking second. And as much as I tried to stay the fuck out of it, like up until this point, as soon as Shannon was like threatening, I was like, no. Now I'm going to say something about it. And so I posted this TikTok that was, essentially just, saying some things about the situation and about how, Shannon was just as much to blame, like took two to tango. It was two people contributing to that dynamic and two people turning that situation into a goddamn circus. Basically, the gist of the video was like, can you like stop playing the victim and just own that, you contributed to that situation equally. And, while your feelings about the situation were totally valid, the way that you went about dealing with them was so fucking toxic and just as much contributing to the goddamn circus that situation turned out to be, as, some of the choices that Carrie made. You know what I'm saying? And like, at the end of the day, like your feelings are always valid, but your actions are not always valid. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you be doing toxic shit. People do toxic shit sometimes. Your feelings are never an excuse to behave in toxic ways. So yeah, that was kind of the vibe of the video. I was just like, if you want to go down this route where you're like fucking threatening people, like we could play that game. And, like if you start fucking, like lying and gaslighting to try and get people to believe whatever narrative that you're spinning to make yourself the victim, like, like that's going to be very easy for me to unravel. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, if you want to keep being toxic about it, like I'll have some things to say about it, is essentially like the gist of the video. And the other thing that I did kind of like mention in the video is that, like the thing is, like, because you think you're the victim all the time, like a lot of the time you don't realize when you're using your feelings as an excuse to bully people, which was, a lot of what I felt like was going on during the Becky So Hot situation. I'm not saying Carrie didn't fuck up and like cross some lines. I agree that she did fuck up and cross some lines, but at the end of the day, she did try and communicate like a fucking adult. She did try and communicate before the fact when, that would have been a great time to have a goddamn conversation about it, like a few days before the promo started to get on the same page. And then, she also sent a voice memo. You know what I'm saying? Like she did try and communicate. And, like I genuinely don't believe she thought she was crossing a line when she did it. And yeah, like the reaction that she got was definitely like, yeah, it definitely went down a bullying like path like very, very quickly. And, you know, like Carrie was obviously taking to Twitter to make sure people weren't like, you know, sending hate or leaving people mean comments on their Instagrams or anything like that. Like she was definitely trying to like, you know, make sure it didn't turn into a goddamn circus when, you know, everything started kicking off. But, you know, like I don't feel like she got the same energy back in terms of like trying not to encourage a fucking circus. You know what I'm saying? Like I think the energy she got back with, you know, tweets like an empath would never and I'm exhausted and etc. etc. Like, you know, that was like very much like bullying in itself, but then also encouraging bullying back. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just like that was the vibe. Like that was totally the vibe. And yeah, so I did kind of like end the video, or well, I did kind of include that in the video that it just like sometimes like I know you think you're the victim in the situation, but a lot of the time what you're doing is actually fucking bullying people because, you know, you're using your feelings as an excuse to behave however the fuck you want. So anyway, after I said all that, I was like, you know, like drop it, or, you know, like if you want to go down this road, like just, you know, just keep in mind you won't be getting away with like lying and gaslighting anymore, because I'll have something to say about it. Anyway, after I post that TikTok, Shannon and Zoe post another TikTok in response where they're using a line about wanting to hit someone. And I was just like, you have got to be joking. Like, whew, like everything, just like straight over the head. Like I was just like, did you listen to a goddamn word I said? Like, how are you going to like post a TikTok that just proves my point, that is you get butthurt about something, victimize yourself, and then use that as an excuse to behave however you want and just like bully people? Like, how are you going to like bully me for pointing out that you bully people when you're victimizing yourself in your own head and like not seeing where other people are fucking coming from? And yeah, like, yeah, creating these weird dynamics in your head where you're like seeing everyone as bad and you're good all the time and it's so innocent. And I was just like, this is not happening right now. So obviously I like posted a response and, you know, tried to like make my point a second time, being like, do you realize that you are literally proving my point right now? Like, if I was upset about what someone was saying about me on the internet, I'd probably go out of my way to make sure I wasn't proving her goddamn point. You know what I'm saying? And the thing that really fucking like gets me is that, you know, at the time of Becky's So Hot, one of the things that I was defending Shannon about was like, I think the hitting line might have been taking things too far, particularly given that there was a name drop in the same song. I was like, I think you should have picked your poison, Carrie. I think you should have chosen one or the other. Either drop the name or have the hitting line. You can't have both. You know what I'm saying? Like that was something that I was like, you know, kind of, you know, a little bit seeing the other side about. And, you know, for then Shannon to turn around and like use this like, you know, sound where, you know, like she's saying that she wants to punch someone in the face. I was kind of like, you know what, let me just ring up the leg store and see if there's anything for you to stand on right now, given like how upset you were about, you know, Becky So Hot. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you going to be upset that Carrie was saying she wanted to hit Becky when you're turning around and then making a TikTok about wanting to hit me? You know what I'm saying? I was just like, hello, leg store. Is there something for Shannon to stand on? No, nothing for her to stand on? Oh my God. What a shock. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just like, kind of couldn't believe that. So anyway, I see that. I post a response being like, okay, you're proving my point. Like, are you going to stop victimizing yourself and stop using it as an excuse to bully people, or what, fucking what? Anyway, like, I see that. I post a response, you know, like, trying to say it in different words. I'm like, you know, like obviously it's not landing. Like what I'm saying, like you're going around doing the exact thing that I'm telling you that you're doing that is not helping you and like is also making the situation a lot worse for yourself than what it needs to be. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, like she didn't reply for a long time and I was like, okay, maybe like, you know, that finally landed. And, you know, she's going to like go away and do some self-reflection and realize how she's making Carrie the bad guy in her head and using that as an excuse to like bully not only Carrie but also me now, for like pointing out that, you know, she's victimizing herself, villainizing Carrie, and you know, it's obviously not creating a good situation for anyone involved. It's like making the situation much more toxic than it needs to be, because, you know, you're not staying on like the same level as everyone else. When you start, you know, making someone better than someone else, you're not fucking listening. You know what I'm saying? And it just makes the situation so much fucking worse, to like not see people like as fucking people, as people who can make mistakes and fuck shit up, and also people who deserve to, you know, like communicate and make things right, which, you know, Carrie was definitely trying to do around the Becky So Hot time, obviously, but, you know, I don't think that really landed. I wonder why, because if you're not putting yourself on other people's level, like, you're not going to see eye to eye to them, you're not going to see eye to eye with them. And yeah, obviously their attempts to, you know, repair are not going to land. So anyway, like, no response for a while, and I was like, okay, maybe she's like, you know, ingesting that. It was, you know, obviously a lot of information, and I probably wouldn't have shared it if, you know, it hadn't all started with some threatening stuff. I probably would have kept my mouth shut and like kept that to myself, kept my opinions to my goddamn self. But, you know, like when it's escalating to the point of like fucking threatening people online, I was just like, something needs to be said. So yeah, that's the choice I made. I didn't get a response for a long time, so I was like assuming that she was mulling it over. But then like right before Carrie posted this TikTok, there was a response. About a month has gone by at this point, and then I see this YouTube video for this podcast episode titled Lesbian Sorority House or something like that. I don't have it in front of me right now, but yeah, I will insert it after the fact. And, you know, I just so happened to have said in my previous video, like, y'all are giving sorority girls, you know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, like, doing all that sort of stuff, like very passive aggressively, was like a very petty, like very much giving sorority girl. Like, just handle it like adults, like send someone a fucking DM, like just talk about it rather than, you know, making passive aggressive TikToks backwards and forwards. Like, I'm just like, aren't we all in our 30s? Like, this is getting embarrassing. So anyway, as soon as I saw the title, I was like, okay, here we fucking go. And it turns out that, you know, if you watch the episode, Shannon and Zoe are talking, and Shannon's once again, you know, trying to victimize herself in the situation, by, you know, like using very specific language that makes her sound like more like the victim, but I think, you know, is very much twisting the truth in order for that to be the case, because she was talking about, you know, getting dumped, which, you know, doesn't seem like that was actually the situation. Like, it's totally valid to like feel abandoned, to feel left in the dust, to feel dumped. Like, they are very valid feelings to have when you go through a breakup and it's being initiated more by the other person than by you. Like, very valid feelings. But just because you feel that way, not an excuse to twist the objective facts of the situation, which was that y'all broke up. It was, you know, a breakup. It wasn't dumped. It's not like Carrie called her up and was like, yeah, you're dumped. It's not like she was like on FaceTime being like, yeah, this is over. It's not like Carrie came up to her like and dumped a like box of shit at her door and was like, you know, never speak to me again. You know what I'm saying? Like, a dumping is like, you know, what I aforementioned. You know what I'm saying? Like, that wasn't the vibe. It was a breakup. Like, that was what the situation was. And like, while it's totally valid to feel dumped, to feel abandoned, to feel left in the dust, that is never an excuse to start twisting the objective facts of the situation to victimize yourself, and villainize someone else. I'm not gonna lie, like, when I saw that that's what she said, I was like, you cannot be fucking kidding me that, you know, you've literally done exactly what I've said a third time now. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, at the time, like, I totally got exactly what Carrie was talking about when she uploaded this TikTok, where she's kind of like acting out, like trying to have a conversation with someone is like talking to a goddamn brick wall, and like nothing you say is like fucking landing. Like, I got that vibe. And she ended up posting this like after, you know, all this went down. But yeah, like in that moment I was like, yeah, this is like literally trying to talk to a brick wall. Like, nothing's going in. Like, I'm sure some stuff's going in because, you know, like at the end of the day, she kind of got there. Like, she did realize that she was making Carrie the bad guy. You know, even though she did claim that she got to that conclusion on her own, like, I'm not fucking buying it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I must have, got an earworm in there. Like, even though it was so goddamn frustrating to like talk and just be like, to have her doing the same thing repeatedly, I was just like, this is literally like talking to a goddamn brick wall. But yeah, apparently something landed, even if she wouldn't consciously admit that something I said, was potentially very true. Yeah, eventually she got there on her own. And if, her ego needs to tell herself that, she got there because she realized that holding on to, like, making Carrie the bad guy was, just not good for her, like, so be it, whatever. As long as you fucking got there, you know what I'm saying? Like, God, that was, like, so frustrating. And anyway, like, this is the backstory of what Carrie's next TikTok was about. Obviously, Carrie saw the podcast episode where, Shannon was saying that she had gotten dumped in their breakup. And, this was how Carrie responded. She responded, kind of losing it a little bit, not going to lie. Like this, like I understand this vibe because I was feeling the exact same way. I was just like, this is like talking to a goddamn brick wall. You know what I'm saying? Like this is so goddamn frustrating to try and communicate with this person. Like I totally got the vibe because I was like, girlie, I'm fucking there with you. You know what I'm saying? Like that is like so frustrating to have someone, consistently twisting the narrative because they're not able to differentiate between the objective reality and their emotional reality. And that, just because they feel a way about a situation does not give them the right to try and twist the objective reality to, try and make the objective reality fit with how they're feeling. Like it's wild to me that some people are out here, like having a feeling, like validly having a feeling. It's valid to feel, abandoned or dumped or whatever it is. And, like when that feeling's like really not lining up with the objective reality because you've gone through a breakup, because your partner's come to you and said, this relationship makes me wish I was someone else. It makes me not love myself. And I need to go do that because that's more important than any relationship, which is also a very valid thing to say. To initiate a breakup, I feel. And instead of considering the possibility that the story you're telling yourself that's leading to the feeling, the story of, I'm getting dumped, I'm, like finding a way to make myself the victim in this situation, instead of questioning that, like instead of questioning the lens through which you're perceiving the situation, you're trying to twist this, like the reality of the situation to fit the story that you're telling yourself about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, don't you think it would just be easier to be like, maybe like all these stories I'm telling myself are the fucking problem. Like, maybe I should not try and twist reality and pretend I was dumped when I wasn't because, like I'm unable to self-reflect and understand, like how I might be contributing to my own narrative and how I totally have the power to rewrite that bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like instead of like concentrating on your own narrative about the situation, which is totally within your control, you're trying to control the objective reality that's already passed and then trying to convince everyone else that that's the reality that happened instead of just the story that you're telling yourself about the reality that happened. I don't know. It just seems like it does not seem efficient, my guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, can we think of a better choice to be making? Really, can we? I think it's obvious. I shouldn't chuckle because, like it was everyone's first day of therapy once. Like everyone has to start somewhere. And, like unfortunately, not everyone gets taught to like firstly validate their own feelings, to, self-reflect and figure out, what the narrative is that they're telling themselves about the situation. Like a lot of people don't learn those healthy skills and that takes time. So, unfortunately, a lot of people do resort to this kind of like unhealthy behavior of like trying to like gaslight, manipulate and deny and, kind of like convince people that a different reality happened than what it did because, they lack the emotional intelligence to be able to do all of those things for themselves. And, like, I don't blame anyone for not being able to do that in this climate because, of course, like, our systems are failing us. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. But to be fair, I do also think it's a little bit silly to, get on the internet and try and switch up the narrative after, we literally have you on the record in your own handwriting writing exactly how that relationship ended, that you're breaking up, that you hoped you would get back together because, what sapphic doesn't, feel delulu at the end of a relationship and want to get back together with their ex, even though there's obviously a reason why they're breaking up. And yeah, like you said in the letter, like Carrie had to go love herself, which, is the biggest red flag that this is not the relationship for her, because, a relationship that makes you not love yourself is obviously not the one. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a little bit sad to me that she thought because of that relationship, she can like internalized that she was the fucking problem. She had to go kind of fix herself, and come back. Like, obviously that's not the case. Obviously this was just not the relationship for her, because it was making her feel like she didn't love herself, which, if this kind of stuff was going on the whole time, which I assume it was, like this kind of like toxic stuff, this like dynamic that I'm seeing, like, yeah, of course she ended up in that place. Like, that's what happens in toxic relationships, my guy. But anyway, back to my point, like if we have you on the record confirming exactly what Carrie's like version of what happened is, which, y'all broke up because of these reasons that, she keeps, alluding to, and you've like verbatim spelled out in a letter, like, I don't know, I just do feel like in that case, it's a little bit silly to get on the internet and try and change the narrative. But anyway, that's a tangent for another day. Like, getting back to the story, we are now like fully up to date on the lore, the backstory of like this row of TikToks, starting with this TikTok that Carrie posted to obviously respond to, what Shannon said in that podcast. Now we're fully up to date and we can continue with the resolving the errors of us situation story. So up until this point, I'm like on a good kind of like vibe again, or like getting there. Then Carrie posted this TikTok, obviously expressing some frustration. And, like I was right there with her because I was also kind of feeling frustrated with the situation. But then the next TikTok she posts is this TikTok. Obviously at this time, like I'm not super secure. Like I keep flip-flopping between feeling kind of secure and grounded in the connection and then having like stuff come up, feeling triggered, dealing with kind of my anxious attachment stuff. Like, and the other thing that made this situation hard at this point was Carrie was obviously starting to tease the Antidote album and was starting to leave clues about, all the tracks and like what the album would be about, and was posting content about it. And obviously the album's about, her, she used to think love was black and white, but it's golden, me being the antidote to her past relationship and just like her kind of like fears around love and attachment in general. But, like I was not used to that being the vibe. By this point, like pretty much everything that Carrie posted most of the time was either referencing me or like responding to something that I'd said to her. And so like I was very much not used to looking at her TikToks and assuming that she was talking to her about someone else. So I obviously saw this and saw the like when she's a walking red flag, but red's my favorite color, and I definitely panicked. The thing I didn't realize until I got some 2020 hindsight and perspective was that she's wearing the exact same black and white striped jumper or like sweater, I guess, if you're American, that she was wearing when she first started teasing Errors of Us. And the thing about her wearing the black and white striped jumper when she was teasing Errors of Us was that this was supposed to be a reference to a line from Daylight that goes, I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden, which is, the parallel she's creating between Shannon as a muse and me as a muse throughout all of her bodies of work right now. Like that's the fundamental contrast that she's making across muses in her bodies of work right now. And she's even wearing gold jewelry in this clip as well. If you like pay really close attention, she's got another gold ring on and a gold chain on. And like that's obviously very reminiscent of when she leaked the I told every one of my friends you won't get a lyric again video, which again, she was wearing a black and white striped shirt, had a gold ring on. To again reference, I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden, to compare muse that, was obviously a red flag to a different muse. You know what I'm saying? The golden, the healing, the antidote to that first muse. But at the time, I hadn't done enough Swiftie homework. Like I didn't even know there was a song named daylight, let alone that it contained a line, I used to think love was black and white, but it's golden. And like, granted, I should have picked up on the black and white striped shirt business, because like, I was the one that had a dream where Shannon was wearing a black and white striped shirt and pushed Carrie into an energy that wasn't right for her. Like, I had that dream. Like, you know, I should have picked up on it, especially after Carrie had like consistently been wearing black and white to reference this specific muse, but it was all gone straight over my head. So, you know, obviously I saw this and like definitely panicked for at least a minute that she was saying that I was a red flag. And so I messaged her and, you know, said that I was upset about that and I was worried that that's what she was talking about. And so that's when she uploaded the next clip that, you know, was from her film Clip for Better Version. And she obviously cut it down to the section where she writes goodbye forever on the notepad. And yeah, it was after she posted that I realized that all three of those posts, one after the other, were supposed to be about Shannon. Like, obviously I wasn't clicking with the black and white striped shirt, but when I saw the goodbye forever posts, I put two and two together that whole row was supposed to be TikToks about Shannon. And then I was like, oh, kind of done it again, to be fair. Like, took like some shit so fucking personally, because, you know, it didn't occur to me that, you know, she might have been talking about someone else. You know? To be fair, like, that's very, you know, autistic problem to have. Like, you know, I definitely process things in my head like very, very deeply, but, you know, very slowly. Like, if something changes, you know, it takes me a while to kind of like take that on and like absorb it and then, you know, reorient my whole kind of like world map around that thing changing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of get into like an expectation that things are always going to be kind of like the patterns that they are at any given time. And then when something switches in the pattern, when something changes, I do have a hard time like reorienting. It takes me a while to reorient and like to process the change to the level that I kind of need to process things at for things to kind of like fully land with me. And I think like, honestly, like it took basically the whole time, like leading up to like from when she first started leaking Errors of Us until, you know, like a little bit after like these posts. So this is like well over 2 months before it finally started registering that like the thing that we were doing had changed. And like, to be honest, I think sometimes that has now made me miss things that she is talking to me about, because, you know, I reoriented everything to be like, oh, she's not always talking about me. And so now sometimes she'll post something and I'll go back, I'll like comment on it or whatever, and I'll go back on it to it like a few hours later and be like, oh, I didn't realize like that you were responding to this thing that I said. Like, yeah, like it's kind of like the reverse is true now, like where I keep not thinking things are for me when they are. Yeah, like this is the thing about being on the spectrum. When things change, it just takes a while for me to absorb it. And yeah, definitely took ages for me to figure out. I'm like, oh, she's not always talking to me anymore. And now, like, because I worked that out, now I like miss stuff when she is talking to me because I've like reoriented like how I've thought about things. Blessing and a curse, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's nice to think about things deeply, but you know, everything just takes me a lot more time, like to kind of, you know, I need some time to process. So yeah, things take me more time to like think about. Fortunately for me at this point where I'm, you know, first starting to really try and wrap my head around the fact that, you know, the dynamic that we had online has changed and she's now not always posting to and about me. Like, fortunately, I think she realized a lot quicker than I did that, you know, like I was not picking up what she was putting down and that she needed to change her tact, because from here on, this is where she essentially starts to make it a little bit more obvious that she's talking about someone else when she's posting TikToks. Obviously, based on, you know, my reaction to that TikTok, she's worked out that I'm not picking up what she's putting down, and she needs to be a little bit more clear and a little bit more overt about it for me to pick up what she's putting down. You know what I'm saying? Which, you know, like good on her for figuring that out, and then changing the strategy so that I would understand what she was saying. Because, you know, it wasn't until she changed the strategy and made it more obvious that I was starting to pick it up. You know what I'm saying? Because basically from here on, she kind of took the initial kind of distinction that she was making, where she was kind of associating Shannon with black and white and me with golden, because I was obviously not getting that was going straight over my head. She decided to like play up on, you know, where the black and white reference came from, or where that reference was kind of like linked to something that I said that, you know, hopefully I would remember. And that's the dream that I had where, Shannon was wearing the black and white striped shirt. She pushed Carrie into a more feminine energy that's not right for her. And so, like that basically from here on in the TikToks, you'll see that when she's talking about me, she's, you know, dressed a little bit more like mask casual. And then when she's talking about Shannon, she like really girlies it up. Like she goes like full femme and like wears dresses and like kind of corset tops and like makes it super, super, super clear that she's kind of like in that energy that's like not right for her, that like very hyper feminine, like kind of performance-y kind of energy. And then when she started doing that, then it clicked. First of all, because like I obviously remembered the dream. And second of all, because now she was making it way more visually obvious that, she was making that distinction between two people. And then it was a lot easier for me to recognize when she was talking about me and when she was talking about Shannon. So this was the next TikTok that she posted that was essentially like, do I want to be her or do I want to be on top of her? And then I was like, obviously realized that, you know, that was supposed to be talking about me. But then, you know, these two TikToks that she posted one after the other, she's like dressed more femme in both of those. And she was talking about, you know, changing herself for someone else in the first one and then being delusional in the second one. And she's obviously in dresses in both of those. And so, like figured out that, you know, this was supposed to be, you know, talking about Shannon. And then that's when I, like actually realized that she'd kind of changed the code that she was using, the strategy she was using to make sure that I understood like who she was teasing what about, to obviously make sure that I wasn't, you know, stressing my little head about, because, you know, I do tend to like stress about things and overthink about things. And, you know, obviously I wasn't in a position to be able to just ask her. And she wasn't in a position to be able to just tell me like what the vibe was. So she found a way around that by kind of like coding everything a lot clearer. And once she coded everything a lot clearer in a way that was, you know, immediately landing much better for me, like that changed everything in terms of like me now no longer feeling like I needed to stress about like what she meant. Because now I didn't find her confusing anymore. She was like being very clear, like when she was talking about one person or the other person. And like that obviously soothed a lot of the anxieties that were coming up, which was like very much kind of like anxious attachment stuff. Like her making it like way more obvious helped a lot. And then I was starting to be able to like find that kind of like groundedness in our connection again, because she was like being way less confusing, and just making it way more clear, and like giving me, you know, some more things to like hold on to for my own sanity, that were like fucking landing with me this time. And I'm not going to lie, once I got that reference, once I realized what she was doing was making the distinction between, you know, who allows her to be herself and allows her to be in that masculine energy, and who was, kind of like pushing her into that more inauthentic, more performance-based feminine energy. Like everything started making a lot more sense. And that's when it started clicking that all the times before she was wearing black and white, trying to distinguish when she was talking about Shannon. Like obviously I didn't get that it was also a Daylight reference, because at this point still didn't know the song Daylight existed. I didn't know that song existed pretty much right up until the release of Antidote. It wasn't until basically the album was coming out that it all finally fucking clicked. But at this point, like, I had realized that she was wearing black and white to try and distinguish that shit was about Shannon. And, you know, like, then I looked back at Eras of Us when she was, you know, obviously wearing a lot of black and white. And I was like, oh, she was trying to tell me that the song was about Shannon. I just wasn't picking up what she was putting down. And so this was basically the beginning of everything resolving for me, like, properly. Because obviously I looked back and realized that she had tried to communicate. Like, I don't think it was realistic of her to think that that would have worked just based on, you know, I'd kind of set up the premise that I was not in a super secure place and I needed some things. And also, like, I don't think there was, you know, she ever kind of said or did anything that gave me a reason to believe that the plan had changed and things wouldn't be coming out on my birthday anymore. Like, I think it was very reasonable for me to assume that, you know, she would not release a song about her ex on my birthday. Like, I think that is a fair assumption for me to have made. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think, like, while I don't think the black and white, like, clues were, like, giving what I think she thought it was giving, like, at the same time, like, I do appreciate that she did try to communicate to me that the song was going to be about Shannon. Like, I see it from her point of view, like, and this is one of those things where I'm just like, this is some boy brain shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, no wonder, like, you know, we were, like, not seeing eye to eye for such a long time until it occurred to me that maybe her brain works different because, yeah, like, she just obviously thinks very, very differently from me if, like, she thought this was the move, because from where the girlies are standing, like, this was not the move. I feel like that would be, like, a mutually agreed consensus. Like, I don't think anyone on the girly brain, like, side of the equation is going to disagree with me that that was not the move. But, you know, like, I am seeing how from where she was standing, she might have thought it was fine. And she might have thought that she was, like, adequately communicating and preparing me for that to be the situation. So yeah, like, obviously that alleviated a lot of my suffering. I was like, oh, she's not trying to hurt me. She just be doing some boy shit. Like, she just literally thinks like a boy and genuinely did not see an issue with what she was doing. And, you know, got to give her some grace because I think that's just genuinely how her brain works. And yeah, like, it was just some boy shit. Let's just leave it at that. And then around this same time, Lead Me On comes out, and obviously the first verse says some things that I just really needed to hear. I needed to hear the, like, I was born to love you, I was made to find you, because, you know, like, that's obviously how I was feeling about her, but, you know, like, for good reason. I was pretty insecure that, you know, she felt the same way about me as I felt about her, given that she'd never said a goddamn fucking word, not from her mouth anyway. She'd implied, but she'd never said a goddamn word. So obviously I needed to hear those things. And yeah, like, I think, you know, just particularly based on, like, me being quite an anxious girly a lot of times in relationships, like, I've been in a lot of connections in the past where I've been in that anxious avoidant dance where, you know, the other person's kind of, like, not giving me much and I'm, like, you know, super invested and, like, super, like, kind of committed to someone, like, very, very quickly. Which, you know, like, I was definitely very invested in Carrie, like, pretty much straight away. So, yeah, like, I really needed to hear those things, and needed to know that, you know, I wasn't suffering for, you know, someone who didn't feel the same way back, particularly given that, you know, like, I had good reason for that anxiety. Like, I'd been in a lot of situations in the past that was, like, very much giving that dynamic. Also, you know, like, Carrie's out here literally calling herself a fuckboy and a serial heartbreaker. Like, of course I'm going to want some reassurance, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think, you know, if your whole dating history is on the internet, and everyone knows that you're a bit of a fuckboy, like, I think it's reasonable for me to have been asking you for, like, some words, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, Lead Me On came out, and even though, like, I wasn't, like, super impressed with the content of the song initially, by the time it kind of came out, I was, you know, 100% seeing it from her point of view, knew that it was written when I dipped, and it was written from a very, like, wounded child energy, that, you know, like, perceives the feminine to be, like, more distant and hard to reach. And yeah, like, that's where the song was coming from. And yeah, that she obviously, you know, felt the way she said she felt in the, song, like, getting that reassurance was also really good. Like that went a long way in like resolving things. And then also around the same time that, you know, these two things are happening, the same time everything's clicking. Lead Me On comes out. I finally get the Daylight reference because a TikTok comes up on my page. And I've heard a snippet of the song. And then, you know, I realize even more like what she was saying with the black and white references. And then also like the Antidote announcement comes out again at the same time. And yeah, like obviously I'm realizing that, you know, the reason for the two muses and the reason why she's like posting TikToks, you know, kind of like all femmed up and doing the black and white thing, and like talking about, you know, the red flag, crush or ex or, all that sort of stuff. Like the reason like she was posting all those TikToks was to, you know, tease that, you know, she's found the antidote. And so then that was making a lot more sense. And I was like, oh, like the marketing strategy be marketing. And yeah, obviously she'd left some Easter eggs in the antidote like promo talking about, you know, your person is the one that you feel like truly intimate with based on, you know, being able to show them your truth. And when she announced the Antidote album, she posts 2 TikToks in a row. One where she's like dressed ultra femme, where she's like pushing her boobs together and like rolling her eyes and being like, this wasn't the real me that I was being when I was in my last relationship. And then she posts like a TikTok straight after, which is, you know, kind of her being more herself, like just more chill, like more like a little bit more masculine leaning. And yeah, like realized that, you know, what she was trying to say was, you know, this person like never let her be herself. Whereas, you know, I do apparently, according to like what was going on at the time. So I was putting all that together and I was like, well, this is making me feel way better. Like, like it's all making a lot more sense now. And so by this time, around the time, you know, Antidote was announced and Lead Me On was released, like I'm pretty good by this point. Like by this point, like enough has kind of been resolved for me that I'm pretty good. And then like a few extra things happened. Like obviously when I actually heard the Antidote album and heard the song Antidote, like that obviously, you know, made me feel a way and, you know, helped clarify a lot of things. And one other thing that kind of happened along the way, which helped to clarify that concern that I had about her, you know, not choosing, like being apart from me by choice rather than force, which, you know, I had kind of like figured out, like was not the case along the way. Like I just kind of inferred it based on, you know, like some of the things that she'd posted, but then also I was realizing why the, you know, the F2 had been split up into 2 albums, F2 and F3, because by this point she'd also teased that it was a double album drop through like multiple mediums. Yeah, like the last thing that she kind of did to kind of like solidify that to me, even though I'd kind of like already inferred it pretty much on my own that, you know, like the agreement that she was under was still intact and she was still not allowed to talk to me, was something happened. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but it was something to do with, you know, some of the people that were, you know, like harassing me pretty intensely online and, you know, spreading rumors and like making shit up, essentially just believing, you know, whatever the like brain goblins in their head decided was the truth about the situation without any concrete proof or evidence. Yeah, something happened with, you know, someone harassing me. I can't remember what it was. I think like someone had released emails or something of like people close to me, or was that in December? I can't remember. Something happened where people like very heavily like harassing me, and harassing like my friends and family at this point. And so so I messaged her and was just like, you need to like fix some shit. Like this, like you get like, let this go on because, you know, like I like have barely signed up for this. Like how are we letting like innocent people getting dragged into it? You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, I kind of was a little bit upset with her, and sent her some messages being like, you need to figure it out. And then, yeah, she immediately posted, I then posted a draft that I had about the UMG ban that was going on at the time. And then she sees me post that TikTok where I was essentially like calling UMG out for being like, for not thinking about what they put in their contracts, and only thinking about, what TikTok wanted to put in their contracts. And so she immediately makes a TikTok, like immediately after I've posted it. I think it was like less than 10 minutes after I posted it from memory, where she's using the sound of, were you silent or were you silenced? And, as soon as she posted it, I realized that the TikTok was meant to be for me because, first of all, she's wearing her jade green coloured hoodie. And second of all, she'd used a sound that had originally been used to reference Lana Del Rey and Taylor Swift's song Snow on the Beach, which is obviously, kind of our first Taylor Swift song. That was very much our song for a long time. Still kind of is, to be fair. And so when I saw the hoodie and then the sound, I was like, oh, she's responding to me and that she's not allowed to say anything, help with the situation, whatever was going down at the time. I can't remember exactly what was going down at the time because there's been a few times that, people online have been a real fucking pain in the ass and made the situation so much harder than it needed to be because they're not using critical thinking skills, and not just, practicing some basic human decency and just being empathetic that, if I was telling the truth, this is obviously a hard situation. And just, even if they are skeptical, just hitting the block button rather than, sending me negative energy and spreading lies and shit about me online. So I can't remember where I was going with this. Anyway, she posted this TikTok being I'm not silent, I'm silenced. And as soon as I saw her post that, I was it kind of reminded me that, she is under heavy restrictions, and really not allowed to do a whole lot of stuff. I think sometimes in moments I really forget, especially when I'm getting really hurt or in this situation. I'm pretty sure people in my life were getting really, really hurt by the situation. And so, or just getting really kind of harassed. It's just hard to receive that kind of energy, particularly when you've not done anything wrong and people are just, spreading hate online essentially. Essentially that TikTok kind of brought me back down to earth and was just oh yeah, she can't do things. I kept losing that at times, but I did know deep down that she couldn't do stuff. Even in moments where I was getting really upset at her about stuff. I think that was kind of the last thing that, she gave me something really, really, really solid, a very solid reminder that, she's not silent because she wants to be, she's being silenced because of, industry BS. That was kind of the last thing that, made everything from the, whole Errors of Us time kind of finally feel settled, kind of finally feel resolved. Basically after Lead Me On dropped, Antidote was teased. I was 90% good after the Antidote album came out, and I obviously heard the song Antidote. Everything was sweet basically, and by this point we'd resumed normal back and forth communication. We'd kind of resumed it a little bit before Lead Me On came out. I'd started being in her DMs a lot more, and sending her some stuff that she was responding to, this TikTok with Gracie Abrams' song Close to You. That was responding to something I sent her. Which is why when she uploaded a clip from this TikTok, she posted it to Slide 9 on her Instagram. That song is definitely about something in particular. We'd resumed full communication by this point, and I was pretty good. I'd gotten everything that I really needed, and the Errors of Us situation now felt pretty resolved to me. Obviously, when we see each other, we're obviously going to need to have some very real and vulnerable conversations and go over everything and talk about everything in much more detail than I'm necessarily going over here, particularly in terms of where we're coming from and how we felt, and, like all of the things that kind of came up, and anything that still feels, still slightly not resolved, or things that, I think we might need to just be like, yeah, I see that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we obviously need to have a lot of those conversations, not just about Errors of Us, but just like the whole time. And yeah, but like, I think the majority of the Discord has been resolved. So yeah, like that's how the Errors of Us situation ended up getting resolved. That's how we kind of like ended up going back to kind of normal. And yeah, like that's the story. It obviously took a lot of time because, after Errors of Us, I was pretty far gone for a while. Like I was, like at the time, like I didn't feel like, I felt like I wanted to be more emotionally distant from her than what I was. But, looking back, I did get really far away in that time, and it took me a while to kind of like come back to her fully. I was kind of like, 1 foot in, 1 foot out pretty much for all of December. Like I was like just very emotionally not available, I feel, or like not fully emotionally open. Like I'd have moments, but yeah, I was just like, I was really, really struggling. Like I was kind of like crawling my way kind of back to the connection. And yeah, like had a lot of hard times, and yeah, it was just like, yeah, well, pretty much, I think all of December, I was pretty much emotionally unavailable to her. And then, January, I kind of was getting a lot closer. And yeah, some things started to like kind of come up and get resolved. Like there was a few other messages I sent her before Lead Me On, like came out about things that had kind of bothered me in, kind of the time that we'd had together. Like the good thing about Errors of Us was that it kind of taught me to like actually say some stuff instead of holding on to so much stuff. Because at the end of the day, like the previous year, I'd had this like end date in mind in which, I was like, okay, well, this is when it's going to be safe to like bring up, all these things that I'm feeling. So I was kind of like holding on to stuff, just like trying not to bring stuff up, even though it was like getting heavy and toxic for me to hold on to, because I knew that it would be hard for Carrie to receive. And I was kind of like a little bit jeopardizing my emotionally well-being for the sake of like not hurting her feelings. But yeah, after the whole Errors of Us situation happened, like I think immediately in the Errors of Us situation, I kind of was like, I am like so drowned with all this stuff that I'm holding on to right now that it's made this situation like actually completely unbearable, and I'm in a really, really dark place because I held on to way too much for way too long, and then one thing happened that like just set off a fucking avalanche, and now I'm like so overwhelmed that, like I had to say some fucking stuff about how I felt. And that kind of like opened the floodgates a little bit and just like started, I think allowed me to like give myself permission to just like bring stuff up and kind of like circumstances be damned, because, at the end of the day, I wasn't choosing to be in the circumstances. And at the end of the day, like me holding on to stuff was getting toxic and just like not good for me. So yeah, essentially Errors of Us kind of like, I feel like the circumstances of that situation like gave me permission to just like say everything as it was coming up. And, I kind of said a lot in the How I'm Doing video, which like a lot of that was, to be honest, just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and just seeing what sticks. Because obviously like I was blindsided and I just like didn't know what to trust anymore. I'd completely kind of like lost my grip on like what the vibe is and what's, not the vibe like at the time, like what's, narrative and projection and, like all my stuff coming up. Like I'd kind of lost my grip on everything. So yeah, like that video was very much like me throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. And just like me being like in so many different mindsets about the situation and just like, yeah, like essentially throwing it all out there and like seeing what, yes, stayed like it was feeling vibrationally true and what ended up kind of like starting to feel, like projection or, whatever. But anyway, after the How I'm Doing video, I ended up just being like way more open about all the stuff that I was feeling, like way more in the moment that I was feeling it, rather than kind of like holding on to it and just, being kind of, too coddling, to be honest, to say stuff to Carrie in the moment. Like at the end of the day, what I was doing is not trusting like her to be able to, like handle the stuff that I was saying. Like, I think I was being way too coddling and overprotective and, borderline codependent, which, has been an issue in the past. Sometimes I do get a little bit codependent and I start, worrying about people's emotional state, like way too much, like taking way too much responsibility for that. And so, yeah, Errors of Us was very healing in the sense of like, I think I just needed something kind of bad to happen for me to just like stop holding on to stuff, and to like start saying some stuff and clearing some stuff and making sure that I wasn't, kind of drowning myself in all the unsaid things. Yeah, like in January, like I started like saying more things about, things that were kind of like bothering me and, like I was definitely holding Carrie like a lot more accountable for things and setting so much firmer boundaries with her, which I think she needed, to be honest. Because, when I started being a lot more firm with that sort of stuff, she like was so great with all of it. Like not only was she able to kind of like handle the way that I was feeling, but also she was able to handle just like I think she just, yeah, like responded really well to me being like, this is like fine, but this is not fine. Like one of the examples that I have of that was, like one of the like, this is fine, but this is not fine situations was I was talking about how, like I think sometimes when I talk about how I'm feeling about stuff, sometimes I get like a bit of a boomerang response in the sense of like, however, like whatever I've received makes Carrie feel. I kind of get like a direct kind of like reflection of that, which I would say was kind of the situation with how she responded to how I'm doing video initially. Like a lot of the time it's just like a boomerang. Like if she feels like a little bit, embarrassed that, she maybe didn't think things through and didn't like accurately forecast how that situation was going to make me feel, then she can kind of like do stuff to try and make me feel the same way that she felt, which is just like a more externalized way of dealing with things. And yeah, like I was like, it's fine if you want to like externalize. I know she has like a pretty strong like fight response to stress. So like when she gets stressed, she like wants to fight back. That's what her nervous system wants to do to regulate. And I was like, that's so fine. I'm so fine for like that to be your nervous system response. Like you can't control that. But at the end of the day, you can't take it out on me. You need to go sort it out in like the gym, in a smash room, go like box some things, like punch some stuff, like break some stuff, like whatever you need to do to like sort it out. You just can't, do that shit to me. You know what I'm saying? So it was kind of like stuff like that I finally started like bringing up and being like, this is okay. This is not okay. Like this, it's fine to feel this feeling. This is not an appropriate like behavior just because you're feeling that feeling. You know what I'm saying? So, when I was like setting some more boundaries with stuff like that and just being like way more kind of firm and way less coddling, that helped like our connection a lot. And I was just like definitely sitting there realizing like where I get in my own way, and how I was like enabling some of the bad stuff. Sometimes I enable things, sometimes I coddle people, sometimes I'm a little codependent, and that's what the situation was. And that actually improved the situation so much when I gave myself permission to like share how I was feeling and what the boundaries in the situation were. I think it was a bit of a combination of like the actual Errors of Us moment like hurting me so much and me just like needing to like find relief from my suffering by letting go of like all the things that were like burdening me, that were like causing my suffering, or exacerbating my suffering. Like it kind of started with like me just looking for relief. But eventually it kind of like became like a permission for me to, say more stuff in the moment, because now I didn't have this like end date, which I could like conceivably imagine having these conversations in person, which is how I really wanted to have them, particularly given that, I was like obviously super mindful of some of the things that I wanted to bring up, potentially being sensitive spots for Carrie. And, like that's me also being a little bit coddly, just like wanting to be like, present for those conversations, to be there like emotionally for her. Like, I do think sometimes I need to just like let her listen to what I say and like handle it however she handles it, and like trust that she will handle it, and not, need to like hold her hand or like, coddle her or like baby her through it, because, that's also not super respectful. That she's a grown, healed adult, you know what I'm saying? And she doesn't need me to be her mother. She has a mother. I'm not supposed to be that person for her. Like, yeah, because, like now I had no end date that I could rely on to like have these conversations. And, for as far as I knew at the time, like this could never end. I was just like, I'm just going to have these conversations as soon as they come up. And to be honest, that unburdened me a lot. Like before that, I was like just so burdened by all the things that I was holding on to, that I was like just, too like, I think just like too in my girly brain of like, forecasting like what would potentially be hard for Carrie, that, I was just holding on to stuff because I was like, like I don't know how she's going to be able to handle this if I'm not there for her emotionally. That was like me and my girly brain doing the exact opposite of what she does, I think, sometimes. And yeah, that's also not helpful. You know what I'm saying? Like as much as sometimes like boy brains be doing some things that seem questionable, at the same time, girly brains do some questionable shit too, because, it's not better being on the other side and like fucking coddling people. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it's better just to like let things happen. The crazy part about this though is like obviously like the majority of the population like don't have a strong kind of like brain going one way or the other, like doesn't lean strongly into like girly brain or boy brain. But those people that do like are like tend to be very attracted to each other. Like they tend to end up together. And like that other like brain that is just so different from your own, like has so much to teach you. Like while I was here, like completely overestimating how what I might say might affect Carrie, like she was there like totally underestimating how what she might say and do would affect me. You know what I'm saying? And that's the difference between boy brain and girl brain. You know what I'm saying? Like her brain lets her like is wired to like, to underestimate those things essentially. My brain is wired to overestimate those things, and that can lead to unhealthy behavior, like where she's kind of doing stuff that sometimes hurts people, and where I'm like not doing stuff which also hurts people. Like of course she was going to get hurt when I was not telling her things, and then hit a breaking point, and then I'm saying it all in one go. You know what I'm saying? Like of course that's going to be like hard to hear, because I was overestimating how painful all this was going to be, so I was holding it all in, and then at some point it all comes out, and then it is overwhelming because I've held it in for too long. Rather than telling her one thing at a time, she hears it all in one go. Yeah, like girl brains know better than boy brains sometimes is my point, and we have a lot to teach each other about like thinking about how something's going to make other people feel, but then also sometimes letting someone get a little bit butthurt about what you have to say, because it's much better to say things in the moment than it is to hold on to stuff and then kind of like like first like be coddling them too much, and then second of all, then like when you do let it out, you fucking bombard them. You know what I'm saying? Like we're very different, but it makes sense to me why we're attracted to each other. Like we do think differently, but it makes sense why we're attracted to each other, and I think we do have a lot to teach each other and a lot to learn from each other in terms of like how to be better humans in the world, and how to like show up more loving, and how to like combat each other's strengths and weaknesses. Already this has been like probably the craziest like learning experience I've ever had in my life. Like it is the weirdest situation to be in, and it's just like this container of like essentially circumstance that creates the perfect storm of just like lessons for me, given that, the way the situation's set up, it's like literally rubbing against every wound I have, like pushing every button I have. And I'm just like being forced to confront like all of my stuff, essentially, like all the pain that I've buried from like past relationships, like, and patterns that I've had, like all the way from childhood. Like this situation has like caused me to like confront all of it. Like I think Carrie and I had this like maybe little love bubble for like maybe 6 months. But like ever since, we've like definitely been on an intense kind of like journey through ourselves and through all of our own stuff, and towards a lot more healing, towards a lot more love. Like I do feel like I've grown so much in my capacity just to love in general. Like I'm gonna cry. Like yeah, she definitely like makes me a more loving human, like just the way she balances me out and just like reflects so much back to me, and just like reflects all the ways that I'm like getting in my own way, or like not being like as open to love as what I could be. Like yeah, I've like grown so much in that regard in my like own capacity to love because of her, and because of the way she like just compliments me like so well, like insanely well. Like it's crazy how well she compliments me, and how well she like mirrors stuff back to me and like shows me like the truth of who I am. Like yeah, it's been like a really fucking crazy journey. But I have to say, like one of the things that's been so hard about this situation is like every day like I feel like better and better in terms of like being a human and being a loving human in the world. Like I feel like my capacity to love has grown so much, but every day that I get better in all of those kind of regards, at the same time like I feel worse because my my heart just starts to ache more and more for her. Like the more that like I fall in love with her, like the harder it is to be apart. Try not to cry. So yeah, like I just feel like so full of love and so like aching for it at the same time. And yeah, that's like one of the like hardest, weirdest parts about this situation. Like I feel like I've been broken open in so many ways, but then also just like now I'm like so full of so much like yearning, so much like aching to be together, and I just like want to be together. Particularly now that like everything's a lot more resolved from the Errors of Us situation, which was definitely my darkest time, my hardest time, but definitely like a big kind of like growth, like learning experience for me. Like definitely like helped me move through a lot of stuff and like confront a lot of stuff that I hadn't confronted, and yeah, like show myself that I have healed and I am able to recognize the difference between kind of like vibes and narrative and stuff like that. Like crazy growth experience, but yeah, like I'm still like just like aching to be with her. So yeah, like it's that's definitely hard. Basically that's like where I find myself at today. Like I'm in so much more of an evolved place like generally, but also so much of a place of like still like aching and yearning for her, but also just like yeah, like definitely feeling a lot more resolved in the Errors of Us, both the Errors of Us situation, but then also a lot more resolved in just my stuff in general, like, and so much more confident in my own capacity to like sit with like really hard stuff, and like feel things and like, trust that I know the difference between, like vibes and what's true and what feels aligned and what feels kind of like calm, and, like all of the ways that I get in my own way and ways that, like, like my own stuff can, like cloud things and, like trap me essentially. Or like, ways that, my old patterns are like not serving me anymore. And like keeping me small and creating barriers to love and like stuff like that. Like, like it's been a time. Like I've learned and grown and evolved a lot. I'm still in a deep place of like yearning, but like, so much has resolved for me, not only in the Errors of Us situation, but also with my stuff. Like so much has been resolved for me. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like obviously I still need to have some conversations with Carrie like offline about the situation in a much more kind of like deep and vulnerable way, I would say. Like, no matter how vulnerable this might appear, like there's definitely other things that, you know, need to be said in the container of that relationship that, you know, I don't think will ever make it here. There's obviously more that was going on for both of us, but that's just what I felt comfortable sharing. And that's, you know, yeah, enough of the gist of the story. And yeah, like that's basically the story of the whole Heirs of Us situation. I think that's all I have to put in this video, especially given that this is getting like really, really, really long. This has like been a 6-hour story. Like probably by the time I edit this down, I think this is also going to be another 3-hour video pretty much. I was expecting this part to be shorter, but yeah, like of course it fucking wasn't, because man, can I fucking yap. It's hard because I remember just like everything. Like I don't fucking forget anything, you know what I'm saying? And so like the whole time that, you know, I'm remembering the story, I'm remembering it in explicit detail. So obviously I'm going to tell the story in the explicit detail I remember it in, because it's actually easier to tell the story in explicit detail than it is to try and, you know, kind of summarize it, because that's not the way I remember it. So yeah, this part's getting really long, and I think that's, you know, enough of the story. Like it's way more than enough of the story, let's be real. So yeah, like that's the story of, you know, the whole Heirs of Us situation, the kind of like hell and back that I went through with that, and kind of like, yeah, a rough kind of explanation of where I'm at now. And yeah, that's, you know, how it all kind of resolved for the most part. Yeah, it feels like for the most part resolved. And yeah, that's the story. And I think I'm going to go, and until I see you again back on this channel for another video, which I'm sure I'll come back and like talk about more stuff that has gone on sometime soon. So you should definitely hit subscribe if you want to come back for more of the story. Yeah, until then, ciao.